Hello, hello. I am so sorry for all the delays. We finally got all the AV figured out. And my name is James Rink. So thank you all for coming on the show today. We have Jimmy Paine here and as well as Dr. Johnny Delirious. So let's go ahead and bring out these introductions. So it is Stardate 76567.7. And I actually had to look that up. So that is the correct Stardate. James Rink here. I'm the host of Super Soldier Talk, so it's my honor to share these stories that we're going to bring today here for you. And we are honored to hear from Jimmy Paine, who was known as Captain Jim Paine, inspired the iconic character of Captain Jim Kik. During his command of the Enterprise, a Vulcan-built starship crafted, we think it was about the night, or Jimmy says about the 1960s. Captain Paine and his crew undertook extraordinary missions, including the rescue of none other than the Loch Ness Monster, which we've talked about in other shows. In his daring operation, the Enterprise crew airlifted the creature aboard the ship's hull, ensuring its safe passage to another planet somewhere, or its homeworld. This mission later inspired the Star Trek IV movie, The Voyage Home. Throughout his service aboard the USS Enterprise, Captain Paine worked alongside the legendary Commander Spock and Lieutenant Uhura. Both, as history reveals, were 4 foot tall elves, elven-like race, from the planet Vulcan, which is located within the orbit of our own sun. Their presence on the Enterprise brought unique perspectives that deepened our journey, bringing our cultures together. And Jimmy Paine is also a super soldier. He was known as Captain Dallas for his distinguished service within the secret space program, spanning from 1959 to 1996. Over these years, Dallas undertook numerous highly classified missions, serving as a shuttlecraft pilot for the Tall White Warriors, and as well as worked at Area 51. He served with the Montauk Boys at Camp. Well, really served. You were used, right? At the Montauk Boys at Camp Hero. His work also includes service with Weyland Corporation, where he encountered a xenomorph on LV-426, and we've discussed this in other shows. And that was the real-life inspiration for the infamous creatures in the Alien movies. Dallas' career took him across planets and moons, from Mars to Titan and Earth's own moon. On Mars in 1974, he and Duncan O'Finian came across the enigmatic broken statue of a colossal humanoid face and a haunting reminder of civilizations of the past. During another mission, he encountered the so-called Tommyknockers, formidable, muscular, tall grays lurking in Martian caves. On Titan, Dallas served as in a giant, extensive underground base where he faced a creature ominously referred to as It, a monster reminiscent of the Montauk experiments, a fierce Bigfoot-like being that grew stronger with each attack. Dallas' achievements also extend covert missions from Vandenberg Air Force Base, including the legendary Apollo 20 mission, which we've discussed as well, accompanied with William Rutledge, and he encountered the EBE Mona Lisa, which was an Oriental featured humanoid, a testament to truth behind the Apollo 20 footage, which is found on YouTube, so you can check that out, which Jimmy says that he actually took the footage of that. Okay, so we also have Dr. Johnny Delirious. So in the early 1980s, Dr. Johnny collaborated with one of the pioneer scientists in the hair tissue mineral analysis, a breakthrough modality at that time. By the 1990s, unaware that he was living with life-threatening hepatitis C and staggering viral load of 12 million, Dr. Johnny was suffering from severe liver psoriasis with 96% scar tissue. His health was in critical decline. He was forced to sell his business, facing a bleak prognosis, only 6 months left to live, which he had to get was supposed to get a liver transplant. So Dr. Johnny refused that procedure, and he chose, which I guess the doctors called you irrational and delirious, right, Dr. Johnny? Dr. Johnny had an ace up his sleeve. Drawing on advanced knowledge gained through his own alien abduction experience with the Greys, he set up like a laboratory to unlock his own unique path to recovery. Against all odds, he healed himself completely, now celebrated as a master survivor, best-selling author, and radio host. Dr. Johnny shares his experience backed up with over 40 years in the health industry, empowering others through his extraordinary journey and professional insights. So we have everybody's contact information in the description. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming on here today. I appreciate it, even though I know we had a little delay. How's everybody doing? Not everybody speak up. Why don't you unmute yourselves?
I'm doing real well, James. How are you?
Oh, just moving along here. Yeah, so people are aware. My dad broke his hip, and I've been busy taking care of him. So I've not been able to keep up with all the content. I've got interviews backed up over a year, one-on-one interviews. So I apologize about that, but we're gonna just move forward the best I can. So, and Dr. Johnny, how are you doing? Why don't you unmute yourself there? Press the unmute button, maybe. It's yeah, there you go. Oh, can't hear you. Okay. Well, audience members, how's everybody doing today? We have a great show ahead of us. We're going to be talking about the Star Trek Enterprise, in case you didn't know. So, yeah, so Jimmy says that the Star Trek Enterprise is real. Is that correct, Jimmy?
Correct.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about how this story begins.
Well, with me, um, I have been in black programs for 35 plus years. Um, I went through MK Ultra when I was 5 years old. So it would I didn't meet or to these Vulcans till around when I was about 20 years old or so. But I had a lot of time prior in the Black Ops program. Um, I think the best way to start the story off, James, is to go through a detailed of my younger life. And it's not who you know, it's what you know. Um, that's how Vulcans are. But I want to start off in the year 1962. Okay, you had the the Cuban embargo going on, and you had there's a lot of people that are nervous because there's nuclear weapons, 90 miles off the coast in Cuba. And then in 1963, um, Lee Harvey Oswald shot um, John F. Kennedy, and the country went through a shock period there. So there's another thing that happened in 1963 that a lot of people are not aware of. Now, I'm going to back up to the year 1943. They were conducting a test on the Eldridge, USS Eldridge, the sea trials prior to turning over to the Navy. So the Navy wasn't in charge of the USS Eldridge. The Coast Guard would always take out surface ships, do a test run because they had to, their duty is protect the border. So um, they took it out and they did the test, and the ship teleported through space. And there was some damage done on the ship. Now, what happened? The ship uh, appeared in Montauk Sound, or right behind Camp Hero, out in the back of it. And I was put on to the craft, the ship, I mean. But during the time I was on, we were doing some more experiments, and we had a malfunction on the ship. And I jumped off overboard and came down. And I would do several more jumps, time jumps, going on and off, and the switches on the Eldritch, we could not pull it down, the breakers to kill the power. But what happened? They ended up getting, some other guys from Camp Hero, and they did get on it, and they disabled it just long enough where they could, we could board back on it, and it was horrible. There were men stuck in the steel, and I was like, at that time, I'm like 7 years old, and I was traumatized by it. And we offloaded most of the crew. We couldn't get the men out of the steel, and the ship teleported back into the future. Now, the crew was traumatized, the ones that got off, and I was traumatized. So, what they ended up doing, they put the crew in a hospital. I was in there with them, and they checked me out along with them. And come to find out that Captain Alexander Cameron, who was the commander of the Eldritch during the sea trial, he is related to Edwin Cameron, the famous psychiatrist who was overall the MK Ultra
Yeah.
that everybody in the United States went through.
He was in charge, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was over everybody's MK Ultra in the United States. He was the head honcho of American Psychiatric Association, and he also had an office up in Montreal, Canada. But what happened? Uh, People didn't know what had happened, because you have people in the steel. So they temporarily halted all the experiments at Camp Hero. They needed to interview the crew and to pick up as much information as they could. And that was going to take at least 2 years to interview these people. So for 2 years, Camp Hero, they didn't do any type of time jumps. They had to analyze what was going on with the crew. And during that 2 years, um, I was in and out of Camp Hero, and I had a problem. I was at a counter, and had ordered some food, and other guys were in there with me, and I wasn't feeling good, so I got up to go to the restroom. Plus, I had to wash my hands, and when I pushed on the door, I went through the door. I could pass through solid objects, and this was very frightening. And anyway, I washed my face and I tried to push on again. I walked through it, and then when I got to the counter, I reached down for my fork because I had a salad on the counter, and my hand went through the counter. So I'm suffering some type of psychological, um, from all the trauma. And the men got frightened, and one of them dematerialized, and it frightened us all. He went back to 1943, and
Well, Jimmy, what year are you in now? In this,
I'm probably within about 4 months of getting off of the ship with the crew. At that time, it frightened everybody. Even all the people in Camp Hero were frightened. They had never seen anything like it. So they ended up putting the crew in quarantine. Now, I was not put in quarantine with the crew because they want to know what happened on the ship. And it would at least take about a year, year and a half, 2 years before they could, get all the interviews from the men. Plus, they had to rewire, uh, do a lot of rewiring of circuits and everything on at Camp Hero at the radar tower. A lot of technical stuff. So what when they got down, when Dr. Earl Cameron got to interviewing it, they classified everything, and they wouldn't let the crew go. And he went in right. They sent the guys out at Frenchman Flats out at Nellis Air Force Base. They want to know where Jimmy was because I was late. So they went ahead and at Camp Hero and shipped me back to Nellis Air Force Base, Frenchman Flats out there. And when they brought me back, see, they had given us some pills for the microwave radiation that I was exposed to. And when I got to the to Nellis, I was in the waiting room, and my intelligence officer from Frenchman Flats come in to greet me, and I couldn't talk. I never stuttered. I was stuttering so bad that he had to help me finish the sentence, and I was blinking my eyes. My hand was trembling like you have Parkinson disease, and to the to his office. It was time for me to take my uh, uh, my ta- my pill, my radiation pill, potassium iodine pill, and I reached in my pocket, and the officer saw it, and he wanted me to give him the pill. He wanted to look at them, and I handed him the pills. I only had 5 of them left. And he got to looking at him. He says, "Your eyes are dilated." So he immediately brought me for a drug test. And when they tested me, I tested hot for LSD. I had acid. I had traces of acid in my system, a hallucinatory drug, and also muscadine. Muscadine, excuse me, in my system. All right. And because I only had 5 of them, and see, back then, all the cities were drug free. There was no drugs on the streets in Los Angeles or New York or Tampa, Florida. And it was real serious. They didn't even have a drug problem or rehab. So what they end up doing,
Was it mescaline, Jimmy?
mescaline, that's what I'm trying to say. It's just so many years back I was having problems, remembering it. So they ended up, the intelligence officer jumped in his vehicle, and he went home, and his little younger brother was about 2 or 3 years older than me, and he got his little brother's football helmet. He got his shoulder pads, and he got his knee pads, all that, and he threw it in his vehicle, and he rushed back to the base. And they brought me into a room that had an iron pipe to it. It went up a wall, and they had some. They tied my hands to my waist, and then took the rope and put it around my waist, and tied it to the iron pipe. You know, and and they tied my hands in such a way that I couldn't untie the. They were bound together. Now, the reason they did this is that when you're coming off of those drugs, they've had cases where people will gouge their eyes out. And sure enough, after a couple of hours, I started going through the withdrawals. And I was beating my head on the floor. I went into a real bad, just a real bad withdrawal. And this went on for about about 3 days. But after about the third day, I was just so worn out that I fell to sleep. And when I fell to sleep, I slept for right at 26 hours, which was very unusual. I was in a real deep sleep. And when I woke up, I had an IV in my arm, and they didn't want to put the IV in me because, I would be thrashing around. And so I was real weak, and they had to flush all these drugs out of my body. And the football helmet, the mouth guard was broke. I had tore that off, banging my head on the floor. And the shoulder pads, I mean, they were still intact, but I knocked part of one off. It was real bad thrashing, when you go into the withdrawals. Now, it took maybe 7 or 8 weeks for them to build my strength back up. And I was like a zombie, and I was only like 7 years old, 7.5 years old. So on that base, they had Native American. The base where I was at used to be part of the Paiute Indians, and they had a medicine man, and they were real worried about my psychological outlook, and so they wanted somebody to mentor to me, and they ended up bringing me down to a sweat lodge, performing rituals to clean my soul and to continue to sweat these drugs out of my system. And so that's went on for about 7 weeks, of just building my strength back up. And that's when I got, introduced to the Paiute Native American medicine man. And most men in black, do have dual religions, because I had been exposed to extraterrestrials since I was 4 years old when I had my first encounter. But I had, like I said, I had already gone through MK Ultra, and I was loaned out to, to Camp Hero. I was actually loaned out to Edwards Air Force Base, and Edwards Air Force Base never told the guys at Area 51 that they were going to transfer me to Camp Hero. So they thought I was at Edwards, but I was actually transferred from Edwards to Camp Hero for the time travel experiments. And back then, that was considered very risky. So they ended up using the paperclip children for those experiments. They wanted blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boys. And, they had, like I said, the German scientists who came over after the war. This is like 1963, 64, 63, I mean. And so they were using the children as well. So word came down, when they got through doing all the interviews and all the studying of the crew members. By that time, we know who my intelligence officer knew who he was. Jack Parnell was, because he called out Edwards Air Force Base, And see, Edwards Air Force Base did the payroll for Camp Hero. You turn your hours in, it goes to Edwards Air Force Base. They audit it, and they're the ones that cut the payroll checks for Camp Hero. So that's how we found out. So I'm ordered from the military that I had to be returned to Camp Hero. Now, right before I was going to be returned, word came down that Dr. Edward Cameron had lobotomized the entire crew. Those men had ice picks stuck into their.
Oh my God, Jimmy, why?
Because that's how you do a lobotomy. You take an
Well,
ice
I know
pick.
that. Why are they lobotomizing them?
Because Edward Cameron sat there and gave them the same type of drugs he gave me. And they were suffering very severe PTSD.
So that would have been you, Jimmy, if you didn't get transferred.
No, they did transfer me. But when I got back to Camp Hero, it was a Friday and it was a weekend. And Earl Cameron and his son were going to go, it was a weekend, his day off. All right. Him and his son was going to go on a hike up in New York, up in the mountains. And he went ahead and took off to do the hike. Now, my appointment was going to be Tuesday, that coming Tuesday. Now, once they got into the mountains, he got overexerted and he grabbed his chest and he collapsed. And because there was so far back up in the hills there, they didn't have, you couldn't drive an ambulance back there. But by the time they did get people back there, Earl Cameron was dead. He had died of a massive heart attack. And we found out. See, that's from Friday. I was supposed to have that appointment with him that coming Tuesday. Now, Earl Cameron, back during the Nuremberg trials, he testified over Rudolf Hess's mental state of mind, and because of that, that's why they locked Rudolf Hess up in a prison for the rest of his life. So one or two things were going to occur, either because I was a paper clip child, which I didn't like Germans to begin with. He was either going to lock me up for the rest of my life or he was going to lobotomize me. So he was a monster. Now, how the drugs got into all the American cities is because of him.
That's right.
He's the one that ended up getting 5 million doses of LSD, and they distributed. They wanted to collect. They're using the drug money to fuel these black ops projects, and so that's how all the cities became drug infested. Was because that one man. All right, so I cheated from being put away in a sanitarium for the rest of my life, or either have an ice pick stuck in my skull. And by that time, they still had to have a psychological review of me. So my intelligence officer said, look, he got to talking to Jack Parnell, who was the station director at Camp Hero. My intelligence officer really didn't want me to be there. So he said, look, now that Dr. Earl Cameron is dead, can I send Jimmy to a psychiatrist at Edwards Air Force Base, and we just forward the report back to you, Jack. And of course, Jack, Camp Hero is still in disarray. So Jack said, "Yeah, just as long as you get me a psychological review of him, I will accept it." So they brought me out to Edwards Air Force Base, and from there, Edwards Air Force. See, before you can fly a jet or have a real sensitive, uh, a very high security clearance, they want to know who's going to be flying a jet, the psychological makeup of these aviators, and they want to know the psychological makeup of people in these black ops programs. So at that time they was using Jolly West. Now Jolly West, um, he was a psychiatrist. His office was at the UCLA campus. So the military drove me to UCLA campus, the college campus, and I went in there and I talked with him. And this was the first of several talks with him. Um, and but to give you a little background on Jolly West, he's the same psychiatrist that did Jack Ruby. You know, when Jack Ruby shot Kennedy, Jolly West was Jack Ruby's psychiatrist, and he would later uh, become the psychiatrist for Patty Hearst. I didn't know Patty then, but I would get to know Patty very well years later. So he was Patty Hearst's secretary. Patty Hearst's correction there. Patty Hearst's psychiatrist. You know, after Patty, robbed her daddy's bank there, and got with the Symbionese Liberation Army. Um, now, Jolly West is also the psychiatrist. If you watch the movie The Exorcist, where the female actor that played Megan, Megan reaches down and grabs the doctor by the testicles, that was Jolly West who got grabbed there. Um, but his character was in the show The Exorcist. To give you an idea how important this guy was. But after I went through several interviews, and I was still stuttering a little bit. Of course, it wasn't that bad, but I still had a lot of shaking in my hand for some reason. And but I ended up getting the report came back and it said, yeah, he's young, he's been through something very violent and very abnormal, and they stated it. Of course, I never read it. I mean, I'm talking about people that were over me, the intelligence officer over me. They read it, and it said that give him time and explain to him what was going on to the best of your ability, and he should grow out of it. Because I was young, I would grow out of it. So I ended up, James, like I said, I went back to Nellis, and I ended up, like I said, it became a lifelong deal, going back and forth with the Paiute medicine men and being very spiritual. But I ended up, because we have a experimental craft at Area 51. I got transferred down to Poose Lake, that facility down there. That's the same facility that Bob Lazar would eventually start working for years later. But when I got down to Papoose Lake, I started learning about propulsion systems because that was going to be my specialty, propulsion systems. And when you have a flying saucer, you have little grays 3.5 feet tall. They can't get a full size pilot in it, so they used me to fly these flying saucers because I was so small.
And
And
Jimmy, Dr. Johnny had contact with the Greys too, right? And
yeah,
weren't you on the ships as well? Their ships?
Well, yes, the first reconnaissance ship that took us to the mothership in orbit around the moon was a very small ship. And I was floating in the insides, so if I couldn't really stand up, but I was floating, so it didn't matter.
well, what happened? Uh, they didn't really know how they worked. Now, I met Colonel uh, Corso, and Colonel Corso, he uh, he was showing my intelligence officer. He took about an 18-inch piece of cable that led down into the engine propulsion system, and what he did, he loaned it out to these universities. They cut it up in pieces, and they loaned it out to universities to study what it was. And they told the universities, they said, look, this is off of a Russian experimental craft, and we really need to know how to back engineer it. So the universities had what they thought was a top secret Russian, uh, cable, but it was actually extraterrestrial in nature. So they eventually figured out how to back engineer it. And of course, by this time, Corso had retired, and he came back to my intelligence officer, and because I was standing there when this was being told, and he was trying to get my intelligence officer to quit. He said, "Look, I'm getting ready to get a big deal with AT&T, and we're going to lay fiber optic lines all throughout the United States." And he was trying to get my intelligence officer to quit. He did get some people to quit, but not my intelligence officer. He was a smart one, my intelligence officer. And then as soon as them guys quit, AT&T goes into a lawsuit because the Supreme Court said, "Hey, you got to break them up." That's when we got all these little phone companies, where everybody could just go crazy, because AT&T had a monopoly on the business. So Supreme Court ordered AT&T to be broken up. So Corso, because they put everything on hold, so Corso never did get to work for the phone company as a CEO over this project. Um, he would later go on to write his book, The Day After Roswell. But anyway, to get on with my story, um, I ended up
And that was Philip Corso. Someone was
Philip
asking about that.
Corso.
Yeah.
Philip Corso. I only met him briefly. He was in civilian clothes at that point. He was retired. So I ended up, James, we were still having problems trying to understand how these propulsion systems work. And we had made some progress, well, like I said, with the fiber optic cables being back engineered. We were able to back engineer and the window, and that's how night vision was made through the observation window. We're able to back engineer it for night goggles. That's also alien
And
technology.
that
Back in,
was that was the first that was the last episode we did where you're talking about in Vietnam when you saw the creatures with the night vision.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want to get into
Like
that.
diasin in it.
Yeah, but we later had the green ones. Um, I never saw the red ones first. I saw the green ones first, and then the red ones came out later. But anyway, um, when one of the younger guys came in, he said, "Look, um, we were still having trouble trying to back engineer the other components. It was just real slow. It was real aggravating." And so we had this MIB. He said, "Look, I'm taking a night class for physics, and it's helped me a lot. And so my intelligence officer, who was a bright man, because they were like 19 years into for the creation of the Men in Black, and they knew the Men in Black were eventually going to have to retire. And so to get an early start, they said, "Look, we're going to send you over to Edwards Air Force. No, not Edwards. We're going to send you over to Kirkland Air Force Base. There's some of the Men in Black had transferred over there to the Sardis base. Now, the Sardis base is to the southeast of the runway at Kirkland Air Force Base, and their mission was to handle the nuclear weapons. Okay, so they had a compound where they store the nuclear weapons at, and the night classes were being given uh, at the school there. So the first time I went into the restricted area where they store the nuclear weapons at, I met the guys there. They call them Z Group. Really, some really nice guys, you know. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them, it came from Frenchman Flats, you know. So, you know, my intelligence officer trusted them a lot more than he did, you know, the guys over Camp Hero. So, you know, you're going to be okay, Jimmy. You're going to go over there, and Z Group's going to watch over you because, you know, a lot of them did come from Frenchman Flats. So when I get there, I go into one of the bunkers and talk to them guys. And out in the corner of the compound, there's a device that measures, it collects wind, and you know, if you got plutonium or radiation leaking, you know, they want to, you know, to, to to capture it, you know, to see how much radiation is in the air or plutonium in the air. They're just safety devices. And these safety monitors, these radiological monitors, they start, I know that they start around Holloman Air Force Base. They probably go all the way down to Biggs Air Force Base. But I do know that they go as far south as Holloman, and they go as far north as the border of New Mexico and Colorado. In fact, they go even further north. They go into Colorado. But now, when they first tried to teach me, you know, you got to remember I'm a real young kid, 7.5 years old, and you have an adult, a military guy trying to teach me, you know, and he knew it, but he just couldn't teach it. I couldn't comprehend it. And there was other children that they put in that program too, because, you know, maybe about several other children. And those children also were going to grow up to replace the Men in Black.
And according to Peter the Insider, Men in Black is ACO, the Advanced Intelligence Contact Organization, Division 6, based out of Pine Gap and Area 51.
No, they're out of Section 6 at Frenchman Flats. They may have some people over at Pine Gap, but they're basically out of Area 6, Frenchman Flat, at Nellis, just above Mercury, Nevada, north of Mercury, Nevada.
Wow. Did you ever see the neuro? Wait, hold on, Jimmy. I got so many questions. So does Dr. Johnny. Have you ever seen a neuralizer before?
I'm not sure. I don't understand what you're saying.
It's like that pen thing that wipes your memories.
Yes.
So that is real.
Yes. I don't want to get in. I already know about Men in Black, about, you know, Will Smith using it. I mean, I've been to that area. I've seen it done, what the show's based off of, but we don't want to go in that area yet. I
So
need to get. I need.
a man or woman?
I really need to get back because
Okay.
we're never going to get. This is a long story. Well, I'll ask you questions when I'm through, James. So they when they realize, they're all getting frustrated because the kids can't comprehend what the you know what the teacher's trying to teach them. So my intelligence officer stepped in. He said, "Look, what are we going to do? We can't find nobody to replace us." And one of the other men spoke up. A third man spoke up and said, "Well, look, um, I know somebody that does know, and but we have to check these air monitors." And they said, "Well, it's up by Los Alamos." Now, Los Alamos is where the if you watch the movie, the Manhattan Project, where the atomic bomb was invented.
Was that the Oppenheimer movie?
Yes, there's been several movies made. Now, the base was built in 1942, 41, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor. General Grover was put in charge of it. Now, General Grover is also the one that built the Pentagon. He's of the Corps of Engineers, and he also built, the facility there at Los Alamos. See, Los Alamos, did nobody live on that land. I mean, the only people that were on that land was a boys' school, um, and similar to like the Boy Scouts, but it was a Los Alamos boys' school. Now the military came in, they bought up all the land, and they ordered everybody off. Mostly just some Indians around that area, Spanish people, and they bought 50,000 acres of land, 54,000, but the actual base is 5,000 acres.
Mhm.
Okay, the actual base, and they start off with 500 people, and it went up to 9,800, 9,700. Well, how many scientists, along with their family members, out there? And the reason they call it the Manhattan Project, because General Grover, his office is in the Manhattan building, a few blocks from the Pentagon. So he didn't want to give the location of Los Alamos. So that's why they call it Project Manhattan. Okay. So once the war was over, and the president announced to the public, you know, we're about the base, and the base soon shut down afterwards. So the base was. It took 2 years to build the base, and from 1942 and 1947, it was decommissioned. So the base was relatively new. It was mostly wood. There were some concrete structures out there, and because of the plutonium, when the base was decommissioned, the military locked it up. It would take decades to clean up the plutonium that was out there. So the base went back to General Service Administration. Now, what happened was they were going to fly me up to Los Alamos, and we landed. There's a makeshift airport there, and the base had been closed down for 19 years. Nobody's in the base because of plutonium. And they timed it pretty good. They had a generator in the back of the airplane on skids, and they had a truck up there. They could crank up, if a winch on it, they could, pick um, the generator up. They had drove a truck up there earlier, and they had the keys to the gate and everything. But what happened was one guy came up in the Jeep, and his duty was to check all the monitors. I mean, there's around about 800 or more of these monitors out there, but he was in charge of that section. And so they open up the gate, and I'm with these guys, and we went in through Bath Tub Street. Now, all that was gravel. All those streets in there were gravel, and all the buildings are shuttered. Uh, and and they went back to where there was some peach trees at. They call that Peach Street. And there's a house back there that they dropped the generator off. And once they got the generator cranked up, the one guy had to break off and go check the monitors. One monitor was within walking distance of that house. And then you leave the base and you go north. There's more monitors going north that he had to check. Now he was late. The guy that was checking it was late getting back. It was at night. He broke down out in the desert, and by the time he got back, it was too dark for the pilot to take off. But what the pilot did, he said, "There's no sense in there's no place for me to sleep in the aircraft except I sleep on the floor, and there's no there's no." He doesn't have a blanket for him. He said, "Well, just go back to this house and sleep on the couch, and when we're ready for you, I'll come get you." So I went and slept on the couch in this house, and eventually the 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 driver came back, and it's too late to take off. It's too dangerous. There's no lights on the runway, so they're ordered to ground the plane till sunrise. So we made a few trips back and forth, bringing stuff into that base like gasoline and for the generator and food and such. And they stocked the house up, and it came time for me to meet my teacher. So my teacher was at the house, and my driver, the military guy, brought me back. Z Group guy brought me back, and we knocked on the door, and the door opened. There's a tall guy there, kind of thin, and he's wearing a hat. And he invites us in, and they shake hands, and they knew each other. And they said, "Jimmy, this is going to be your teacher. This is Jimmy Paine, and this gentleman here is Professor Robert Oppenheimer." And I didn't know who Robert Oppenheimer was. I mean, I'm only like 7.5 years old. And, he talked to me a few minutes and, just casually talked, trying to figure me out, because my fingers were still shaking a little bit, like, a little nervous there. And he said, the driver said, "Well, look, I've got to go. I've got monitors to check, and I'm going to leave Jimmy here. And when we come back out of the desert, uh, we'll pick him up and we'll depart." And Robert said, "Fine." And so he took off. And so he brought me into the study area. He had his books in there in his desk, and he sat me down. And I was still, like I said, doing a little bit of stuttering. I wasn't blinking too much, but uh, yeah, because I was still traumatized. So his job was to teach me physics, and I'm 7.5 years old. Now, when you go to learn physics in high school, you have physics one, physics two, physics three, and then you go to college and even learn more physics. Well, he's got to explain it where a child can understand it. And so he started explaining things to me. And this would go on, for several months. And, but the more that he explained it, the more I started to understand it, and the less my hand shook. My fingers, the trembling would slowly go away. And, he pulled a spiral, uh, a spiral book out, like you paper book that you write in, like you do in high school. And he wrote out some formulas, and he says, "I'm going to teach you how to do physics, mathematical calculations, physics." So this went on, like I said, for about 9, 10 months, almost 11 months, and it was a real long process,
Oh,
James.
hold on, we got a question from the audience. Did they bring you back to your 7-year self after your 20 back? Because there's a lot going on at this really young age with you.
No, James. No time travel was involved with Robert Oppenheimer. Just give me some time, and that's going to be answered. Just give me a little time.
Okay, audience, let's all be patient, Jimmy.
Just be patient. More information is going to come in. It's going to be fantastic. It'd be well worth your wait. Now,
What did you feel about that physics? Was it like way over your head, or was it confusing, or did you absorb it?
I started to absorb it, and the more that I absorbed it, then the more you have to remember. It takes a while to know somebody, and I felt comfortable with Robert. Well, Professor Oppenheimer, I felt real. You know, he was trying to help me, and at that point, I had a Native American Paiutes. They were trying to help me spiritually, and I had been treated, really bad, because of the violence of the Montauk Boys, uh, being locked up in a bunker, underground bunker. But like I said, I started learning. But what would happen when it got towards the weekend, he would leave. And what had happened was he wasn't well. He was going to a clinic. Um,
Is this Robert Oppenheimer?
yes, he was going to a clinic, and he was taking radiation treatments, and he had also been taking chemo. And they were trying to he had cancer. He thought he could beat it, but he can't beat it. Okay, it's they were keeping it quiet.
Was he exposed to radiation poisoning?
Yes, yes, cause of the Trinity blast. He also smoked. Okay, well, he's trying to fight the cancer, and he'd been treated real bad because he lost his security clearance, and I'm going to get into that too, because I'm going to point some fingers here tonight to the military, and I'm going to tell Robert Oppenheimer's story, and I'm going to tell it the way it should have been told. Okay, so what happened? Damn, I'm choking up here because it's really sad what I'm going to be telling you, James. Uh, he One moment while I collect myself here.
So you and him had a really good
Yeah,
emotional bond.
yeah.
I'm sorry,
He's
Jimmy.
like a father figure to me.
I'm sorry.
So I told, he would take his radiation treatments and his chemo, he'd come in real weak. And at some point, it was evident that he wasn't going to overcome it. He thought he could, but it wasn't. He wasn't going to overcome it. So these mathematical formulas that physics that he was teaching me, it was something that he was working on. He didn't want to leave it to the military. Okay, he wasn't happy about the detonation of the bomb. It is too much power for us to handle. Okay, so he is teaching me this. I'm got a hold of these notes, these mathematical physics, and he's teaching me. And I only had about 4 or 5 days left before I could have the formula, the complete formula. And he dies on me. He died. And when he died, I died, it hurt me really bad. And because I'm going back into depression, I'm real close to knowing what happened, why the men on the ship were stuck in the steel. Okay, so after he dies, his daughter, Tony, I met Tony and I met his son, Robert. I think his son goes by the name Ronnie, but I'm not sure. Uh, but Robert Jr. would go on to become a carpenter in life. He likes working with, you know, wood, making things. I don't really know Robert Jr. I just talked to him a few minutes, and that was very briefly. Uh, and I talked to his sister Tony, and Tony was about um, she was in a college when I talked to her. And I came up on Tony. And Tony was walking out of the house with with Robert Oppenheimer's books, her daddy's books, and I wanted to get my notepad, well, my spiral notebook. I wanted it because I wanted to try to finish the formula out because it meant a lot to Robert. He wanted me to finish the formula. And Tony, opened her arms up. She looked through the paper, the books that she had. It wasn't in there, and and she said, "Jimmy, you can go into the house and look for it, and you can get this, the spiral notebook with your course in it, and and take it with you." So she gave it to me. Now I want to say something here. I did not take anything classified. It wasn't on government paperwork. It was a spiral notebook like you buy at Walmart. You know what I mean? Just what you use in school to write on. All right. But when I got in the home, by that time Tony had left, and what his wife Kitty. I didn't know Kitty, but I knew that my intelligence officer knew Kitty. I don't want to get in her just yet. But when I was in there looking around in uh, in the room where he was teaching me at, I went in. I didn't see what I was looking for, um, but I opened his desk up, and there's a book in there, another book, and it's got something stuck in it. I opened it up, and there was a picture in there, and it was a picture of the physicists that were at Los Alamos when he was there. I presume Robert took the picture. I just presume that. But there was Professor Everett Teller. Of course, Everett Teller would go on to testify against Robert and cause Robert to lose his security pass. And lo and behold, it was the most bizarre sight, James, I have ever seen. I've never seen something this bizarre before. But in that picture, it showed all the physicists. They're sitting at the table. Some of them were standing up. And at the end of the table, there's an extraterrestrial. And the extraterrestrial was dressed up in a suit. They were all wearing the same suit. Yeah, I've never seen an extraterrestrial wear a dress suit. But they dressed this extraterrestrial up in this suit. And I'm looking at their names. And one of the names said J Rod. That was the alien. His name was J Rod. Now, right then and there, things got real strange for me because I knew J Rod from Area 51. That wasn't J Rod.
That was your friend, Sweetie, the gray.
No, Sweet is somebody else. I know more than one Gray, James. J Rod is over the back engineering at Area 51. But what has happened here? The alien in the picture stowed the identity of J Rod. I mean, it's one thing if somebody stowed your you know your identity. This is an extraterrestrial stealing another extraterrestrial's identity. So I knew a couple of things right then there. I knew that I had seen uh, that alien there before, and I had to think about it for a while. But a couple of years earlier, it wasn't all that many years earlier, that same alien was trying to make a break for it, and they did what I would call like similar to a Vulcan mind melt, where they put the hands up to your temple. But a Vulcan didn't do that. That was another extraterrestrial that did that. I presume he learned it from the Vulcans. And that picture's out on the internet. I didn't put it in tonight, but um, what happened was he was held up in the Penwater Cave, um, and he was trying to make it to the highway. And Colonel Jackson went out there and with other men, they arrested this extraterrestrial and put him in handcuffs before he could get off the base. So I already knew that the alien in the picture had stolen J Rod's identity, and that he had already been arrested by the guys out at Frenchman Flats. And then I knew that the atomic bomb, the the knowledge they needed was extraterrestrial in nature. Okay, the physicists needed a little bit of help, so this alien came in and he gave the knowledge of the atomic bomb to them. Okay, well, now this is like you're taking a gun and putting a gun in a baby carriage, James, a loaded gun. When that alien did that, he gave it to the scientists, and then the scientists developed the bomb and gave it to the military. Okay, so now we have thousands and thousands of nuclear bombs. See, the extraterrestrials, they don't want to fight us. They want us to blow ourselves up so they can step in
But
and take over. Let me finish. Let me finish. They want us to blow ourselves up where they can just step on in and take over. And so we're building all these underground bases because they don't take sunlight very well. It's not very bright where they come from.
okay, I want to comment something. So, according to Dan Burish, there were about 40,000 years in our future from a negative timeline that had nuclear war. There were humans that mutated into grays from this nuclear fallout. So that's why they gave us the weapons, because they wanted to manifest it so their timeline can exist. What's your thoughts on that, Jimmy?
James, when these women get abducted and their fetuses are taken from them, they take a halfly developed human baby and they inject alien DNA into it. And so they're trying to strengthen their bodies up. So in essence, we are them and they are us in the future. Okay, but let me get on. We cannot stop here because we're not going to get to the Enterprise if I don't go on. So I left and I went back to Area 51, and I have to grow up. Okay, so I locked my notebook up, and I'm shipped back to to Camp Hero. Now I wasn't at I stayed at Camp Hero till I was about 10 years old. And Vietnam has started up. So at Dalat, South Vietnam, they're going to build a nuclear power plant. Well, I'm 10 years old, so they send me to Dalat, South Vietnam. There's Vietnamese physicists that had trained at American universities. So all the Vietnamese uh, physicists were going to be at that nuclear power plant in Dalat, South Vietnam. And when I get there, they didn't have a project blue book. Um, Nobody did, you know, you know, a project blue book in Vietnam. I believe they called it Blue Page in Vietnam. But because I had all the free time there, I would later get into that. But when I got to the nuclear power plant, um, you know, I was there when they powered it up. So I'm still learning, about the atom and everything, nuclear power and such. And I'm still getting my education where Robert Oppenheimer, had died. And, but I hung around, like I said, Vietnam, and they went ahead. I don't know why they didn't want Bill Cooper. You know, I mean, he was more suited for that. But I guess Bill was just too busy on the river. But they went ahead and put me uh, over there, and I would have to radio back in and fill the reports out of UFOs and such like that. And that's when I got up in Cambodia. Um, by that time, that's where the movie Predator really occurred. Um, and if you watch Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's being beat up by the alien, it sounds like a child being beat. So that was me, the alien beat up. Um, but I managed to kill him, crude way, because I was used to Native Americans. Plus when I was in Vietnam, I went to Tony Poe. He was up in Laos, and if you watch the movie Apocalypse Now, um, the Colonel, well, that was who I was with up there. Uh,
Colonel Kurtz.
well, Colonel Kurtz did kill. The character is based off a real person. He did kill four intelligence officers. But when I first saw the heads cut off, at the temple, well, it took me a while to understand Kurtz. Of course, that was because there was cannibals out in the jungle, and you catch a cannibal and cut his head off, it scares other cannibals off. So he wasn't insane. He read his poetry, but the character Lance, the surfer, well, I like to surf, so they made me out to be a hippie on drugs. I grew up in Vietnam. I didn't leave Vietnam till I was 17 years old. But anytime you see, like I said, I spent a lot of time doing the UFOs up to 17 in Vietnam. But I want to back out of that now. I want to go back um, to Nellis Air Force Base. All right, the Vietnam War gets over. We lose it. Even though, I talked to President Ho Chi Minh, I was unofficial contact for Ho Chi Minh, getting him lined up with, you know, um, uh, Kissinger. I knew Kissinger. Um, but anyway, after the war, I go back to Nellis. I spent a lot of time at Nellis, and I keep going back between Nellis and, Camp Hero. But in 1977, they launched Voyager, the um, the satellite. They actually launched two of them a month apart, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. Those Voyagers were made by the JPL at Pasadena, California, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Well, about 1980, we get a report. It says, look, over at Renham, there's a base over there, an American military base over there over in England. And there's some strange lights that's been coming around, and they want to dispatch me and one of the other guys to go over there to see what's going on. So we go over there. Sure enough, there's lights up in the forest. So we set up generators in an adjacent field. Everything's restricted. Nobody's going. Base was in total lockdown because they had nuclear weapons there. And me being, I was able to see. I can build a nuclear weapon if I've got the parts. I know how to handle nuclear weapons. I know how to arm them. I guess that was one of the reasons they wanted me over there. But I'm there to observe these strange lights to understand them. So these lights come on, on and off for several days, and it gets real close to Christmas or right after Christmas, but it's right around Christmas time. And sure enough, they come down, and I can reach out and touch one of these orbs with my hand, almost touch it, and it flew down into the ground. So I already knew that they were, they're astro beings. All right. Um, but the power went out with the generators, and of course everybody's in the dark, with flashlights, and we see larger lights up into the forest there. But the radios go off, and it said, "Look, we got something big down at the radar tower. The landing tower near the airfield control tower. I mean." So we head over there. I got up into the control tower, where the planes land, and I see the largest UFO I've seen in my life. It was like it was on fire. I cannot tell you how large it is because it was so close. I couldn't see the outline of it, but it lit damn near a whole section of that base up. It looked like fire, and it moved very slowly. It was only just a few yards, maybe about 10, 12, probably about 15 feet if I could have opened the window from me. And the radios are going off. There's other instances. The other lights are in the field. So Colonel Holt, who was over that, he goes into the forest with some of the men, and they get separated. No, I don't think he went in first. The men went in first. He stood at, you know, he was up on the road, um, giving orders to everybody else. So they sent a team in there to investigate, two young airmen. Uh, but what happened was I entered, but I went in from a different angle from that team and Colonel Holt, and got in there, and I started noticing fog coming into the wooded area, into the forest. This fog acted very strange. It rode down the trees like it was being poured, and then from there it rode down the trunks, come from the sky, and it's like it was being poured. And then it got on the ground, it lay like about a foot on the ground, and then it went up to the knee high, and then almost to waist high. I had very clear vision above my waist, perfect vision. Well, with my flashlight, but I couldn't see my feet if I looked down because they were covered in fog. And I see this triangular black craft that lands a few yards from me. I walk up to it. There's no landing legs to it. It's hovering. It's in a stationary hover. And it looked like a black pyramid. It was so black, James, that it, it, in other words, if I took my flashlight and shined on it, it wouldn't reflect. It absorbed the black. But the light, there was some lights from the other craft above that were illuminated. My light never would illuminate it that well. So I walk around this, I'm looking at it, and I see three round circles, maybe about 4 inches wide. Three round circles, they're interlocking, and these three circles sat inside of a pyramid. So what I did, I reached over to touch it. Now, when I first touched the craft, I, I it was I wrote it down here. Give me a moment.
Jimmy, is that what it looks like there?
Uh, More triangular, um, somewhat, but not. It's a little different. Like I said, I could shine my flashlight on it. It absorbed the light, but I do have some light from the mother craft.
Did you get a tingling sensation when you got
I'm
near it?
I'm getting to that. Let me get hold your questions. Now, when I put my hand on the craft, I touched it with my first few fingers before I put my palm on it. And I immediately, telepathically, this is what I was receiving: 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0. If I put my if I took my hand off of the craft, I didn't. It was communicating telepathically, but only if I touched it. If I pulled my hand back, it stopped. If I put my hand on it, it was communicating at a high rate of speed. These numbers were coming very fast. Now,
Binary codes.
they're binary codes. So by that time, I reached down where these three round spears are at, these three symbols that are inside the triangle. And I touched it. And when I did it, a panel opened up right where I touched it at. And there's no scenes. There's no when you think of a panel open up, you want to like take your finger. You can feel the outline of the drawer. You didn't. This it didn't. You did. It was smooth. Okay. The whole craft was like black. It was like a black mirror. Okay. At that point, it did reflect. So it reflected on me first. Now, when he opened up, there's a microphone in it. And I reached down and grabbed the microphone and talked into it. No one didn't answer. And all of a sudden, the craft started to rise up. It just wanted me, it wanted to hear a human voice, I believe. It didn't matter it didn't want to communicate with me. It just wanted a human voice to make contact. Now, when it lifted up, it changed colors. It was going from a pink color underneath. There's no heat being given off. It's totally silent. It did not even make the fog move. If you fan fog, it's going to move. The fog did not move. It just raised up, and it went towards went up. It got up kind of high, and it went through the trees. And I tried to follow it, but it was just moved a little quicker than I could. And but when it came back down, that's when the other two airmen from that base, got near it, so they could see it without the flashlight. It was still mirror, and they walked around. They made their observations, and one of them put their hand on it, and a similar thing happened. Now they never did open or the panel. I'm the only one that ever opened the panel up.
Well,
Nobody.
but Jimmy,
Let me finish.
why were you even at this military base? But I mean, it sounds like you're at every critical, important junction in our history.
Because that's what MIB does, James.
So you would have known this was coming then. They knew.
James, anything that's abnormal, they sent us. You're the first to go and last to know. Okay? Let me get on with the story. Not being ugly, I'm just, when you break my chain of thought, I get confused here.
Okay. So
Okay.
the panel popped out.
No. I'm the only one that saw the panel, and I'm the only one that talked into the computer on this craft. Now, those two airmen, they made their report. All right. The craft, when they got through, the craft went up in the air and left. Okay. We came out, we talked to the colonel for a few minutes, and we're no longer needed. He's going to make his report up. So we head back to Area 51. Now, they investigated over in England. They said, well, we have a UFO, and it's at a nuclear base. And people got worried. They said, what's a UFO doing at an American base with nuclear weapons? And why won't the Americans tell us what happened? So the Colonel, Holt, he was ordered not to talk to anybody. But he only had part of the report. He didn't have my report. He had his report. He did his report by his men. My report was classified for a number of years. Now, I'm still kind of young, James. I'm probably getting close to 20 at that point. Now, I didn't meet my first Vulcan until I was like around about 22 to 23 years old. Now, when I was at Nellis Air Force Base, intelligence officer came in one day and said, "Look, we're going to have some Vulcans that are going to come and visit, and we want y'all guys to brief them on everything they want to know." And everybody, let me finish. Everybody in the room agreed. And one guy says, "Well, what do they look like?" And the officer said, "You'll know." They said they have ears like a dog. Now, when you watch the movie Enterprise, you see those pointed ears. Those ears are not. That's their interpretation. I've actually seen Vulcans. Okay, so the first time I saw it was a few days later because the other men in black were seeing them, and they were just making their rounds. But the first time I ever saw a Vulcan, because I did the weather reports, go out, release the balloons, what have you. The very first time I saw a Vulcan, there was 5 females, and they had just gotten off of the craft, and they were walking, and they got, about a football length from me, and they stopped, and they're talking, they're looking over at me, and I can't leave my post, unless it's something, an emergency. So I want to be by my radio. And so he talked for maybe about 20 minutes or more. And 4 of them stood there while the oldest one was in the front. And he had 3 more of them, grown ones behind her. And he had the young one. I think she was about 16. She was the one that walked over while the other one just stood there and stared from a distance. And she walked up to me and she said, "Look, we're new, and we're looking for the processing center. Can you show us? Can you show me where it's at?" I said, "Sure." So I pointed. She wasn't that far, but she couldn't see it because I'm out in kind of a remote area out there. You'll see me before you see the main buildings. So I told her which way to go. I pointed. I said, "Just keep walking. You'll get to it within about 30 minutes or so. Just keep walking this area here." And she thanked me. They left. Now, that was the first time I saw them. Now, a few days later, sure enough, the men showed up. One of our guys drove up, and they get out with the Vulcans. And they walked in, and he said, "They're here." And he said, "Go ahead and show them what you do." So he stepped back out. And of course, I showed them everything I was doing. They were very interested in Earth weather. and I was showing them everything, that I could, the reports, the wind patterns, all that, temperature, all that. Um, and they left after a while. Now, at first, I never saw Spock. Spock wasn't the one I met. The first science officer I met, his name was Sovak. And Sovak, it when I started to get to know him, he reminded me of Oppenheimer. He was a dedicated teacher. He's a science officer. And the other two or three that were with him, there was three of them with him. They were his students. Now, so a really nice guy. I mean, I really liked him, and but days would pass, James, and I would see that girl, that young Vulcan female. I see her coming and going, and when I would see her coming and going, I just kind of nod off to her, and it got to the point where she would be waving at me, and because I was out there all alone, she was very social, and she would come up to the to the weather station there, and she got to talking to me, and I realized that there was something else to her. Um, she was looking for an off-world boyfriend, is what she was looking for. And young Vulcan females, they sleep around a lot. And
how old is she now?
she's 16. I'm about 22, or I estimate to be around about 22. Um, but I'm kind of lonely, I'm out there, and she didn't look bad. Of course, she had ears like a German Shepherd, but other than that, you couldn't tell the difference. Perfectly normal, except for the dog ears. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up sleeping with her. I had a romantic fling with her. And of course, the other Vulcan females, they knew. Now, the eldest woman that was in that group the first time I saw them, that was her grandmother, and the three other ones behind her, those were her daughters, and then the girl that I would end up sleeping with, that one of the women that was her mother. So you had all the females in the family. You had the grandmother, the three daughters, and then her, the young girl I was going with. Uh, Her mother was one of the three, and the other two were her aunts. And but what had happened? Um, how I actually got romantically involved with her. When you're out there, you get a little hungry in between meals. So I would always go get a candy bar and keep it in my front pocket. And when I got a little hungry, I just eat the snack, hold me over till I can get to the mess hall. But one day when I was in bed with her, um, I had this Hershey chocolate bar, and I pulled it out. I said, I broke it in half. I said, "Here, have this." Now, let me tell you something about Vulcans, how they are, James. Their metabolism is very high, and they have a craving for high protein food. I didn't know that. And because she had reached puberty they go through a 7 years where their blood kind of boils. They get in heat, and
It's called a pomfar.
yeah. Well, when she started eating that Hershey chocolate bar, and then she would look at the almond that was in it, she'd eat it. I mean, she throws some sex on me you never believe. I ain't never had sex like that. She wearing me out.
And
And
she's 4 foot tall, right?
no, she's nearly she's just a little shorter than me. You know, if she walked up to me, her head would be just about where I can put my chin on her head. But she had a hell of a figure, you know. And other than for her ears, you know, if you put a cap over her head, you couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't tell the difference between her and a regular girl. And the problem is, I mean, the sex really took off after that, you know. And I got, I don't know, I guess maybe I got psychologically, you bond with them. And but she
But
says
she was probably cheating on you though, if they were
no,
promiscuous.
no, she wanted a human boyfriend, or she wanted an Earth human, or an Earth boyfriend. See
Did she say why?
huh? Yeah, she'll be alive,
No,
but
why does she want a human?
cause she's reaching puberty, and then when I gave her the chocolate, it supercharged her sex, her sexual overdrive. I uh, and these are like wild romps that I was having with her. I never had sex like that. So uh, what happened was, she, you know, she wants to leave the base, but I can't take her off base because one, you know, you just don't do that. One kid had taken one of the men in black. His younger brother took some trick or treating, a little gray trick or treating, threw a blanket, I mean, a white sheet over his head, and they ended up making a movie over that. I forgot the name of the movie, but
What's it called? E.T.?
yeah, it might have been. I don't know. But the reason I know about it, I'll tell you about the mini bike. I get to the mini bike story in a little bit. Um, so I can't take her home, and she's very curious about how humans. I mean, she wanted. She was just very social. So I was careful, you know. I can't take her off base, so you know I'm going to borrow the kid's mini bike, and you know I go back to the exchange, and you know get more chocolate, and because you know she was giving me good romps, I'm going to you know keep feeding her, you know, and go in there and get her some stockings and some chocolate, you know, and go bring it to her. You know, I'm wooing her, and I get her on the mini bike. Here I am, 20 something years old, and she'll get on there with me, and we go on a mini bike date out in the desert, you know, which was fun. You know, you know, you couldn't tell the difference between her. She acted just like a regular Earth girlfriend. But one day she says, "Look, Jimmy, we're having a picnic, and I'd like for you to join our group." And
Group of Vulcans, all Vulcans.
all Vulcans. You know, the only thing I did at that time was kind of, you know, talk to the Vulcans. You know, tell them the weather report, stuff like that. Personally, just you know, on a work. You know how you work with another worker. You know, but what had happened the months that she was there, there was a Vulcan on the backside where they would keep the, you know, the Loch Ness Monster. They had ponds back there, and that Vulcan was taking the temperature of the water. And I knew the water was kind of high, get up around to mid 80s, and it was stressing out the Loch Ness Monster and her baby. That was the first mission I would get to go on. I hadn't got there yet to that first mission, but Ended up, the Vulcan said they ended up getting contractors. The Air Force got contractors to go in there with a drag line, and they dug down extremely deep, a pond next to the existing pond. So they about gave it 40% more. They enlarged the pond 40% more, but they built an additional pond on. And it went down. They put a dock out there, and when they dug down, they just build the mounds around the where they wanted the dock, and they dug it extremely deep. And the theory was that when the sun came up from the east and go down in the west, or either vice versa, uh, I mean, they turn it in such a way where the wall would face the south and north, but it was dug where the sun comes up east, goes down the west, but the way they dug it was more pronounced towards north and south. And it's kind of like, if you're in the sun and you walk behind a building, it knocks the sun off of it. It's a little cooler in the shade. That was the theory of it. And they dug some wells next to it, and it took them, several weeks to fill this pond up. It was really deep. And when you're in a desert, there ain't no place, to really hang out. So this was like a swimming pool, you know what I mean? Now I never seen an alien swim. Excuse me, I never seen a Vulcan swim, but I'm sure they knew about water. Um, so I get off work, I drive out on the mini bike to where the pond's at, and just as I'm getting off the mini bike, I see her. She's on a beach towel by the pond, and I'm seeing the kid, the one I was telling you about that took the little gray trick or treating. Well, he goes running and he jumps into the water. He runs off the wood dock and he jumps in the water. And he gets out there and he's having a good time. And I think what happened, he had just eaten, and that cold water kind of shocked his system. He had a cramp. He started getting cramps in the water. And I'm like almost a football field from the dock for where I'm standing. And I'm just walking up or getting off the bike. And he gets out there and he starts hollering. He's drowning. So instinctively, I looked up when all the hollering was going on. There's Spock. And Spock was just standing there at the end of the dock. Right before you put your foot on the wood, he was at the end of the dock, standing on the ground there. And he was looking at the kid drown. Now, this is where his personality comes in. They think as a group. We're not of the group. All right, he is a science officer. And they deal in logic, not pure logic. What are the chances of him jumping in and getting pulled under by this kid and both of them drowned? What are the chances? What are the chances if you're a time traveler and you tinker with the timeline? If you tinker with the timeline, you alter it. It's not good for a time traveler to tinker. I know it sounds hard, but I learned that at Camp Hero. If a car's coming and you're walking across the street, I'm not supposed to interfere if that car hits you, James. Now it's different if you're one of the Montauk Boys. I would intervene if we were on a mission. It sounds code, but that's just the way it is. That's a law of physics.
The
It's
law, well, the law of karma.
yeah. It's you can't do it. All right. So I run past. I'm running to the dock as hard as I can. I realize the kid is drowning, and I wasn't going to let him drown. He's a good kid, he's a dumb kid, and he is related to one of the men in black. And I'm running so hard, and Spock was just standing there looking. And I ran so fast that when I got next to him, he bowed his back backwards. He didn't, he felt the wind as I passed him. And I ran at the end of the dock, and there's a life ring with a rope on it. Now, Spock, he didn't think about that. They don't multitask very well. They look at the problem. They don't multitask. With me grabbing the life ring and throwing it in with the rope tied to the dock, I'm multitasking. I'm doing several things at once, and I'm taking my shoes off right before I jump in the water. I'm grabbing the life ring, I'm throwing it in, and I'm jumping in the water to swim out to him and grab him. And by the time I got out there, the kid went under. All right, and just a few yards off from that dock, then it gets really, really deep. The ledge there just drops off. You can't see the bottom. And I'm diving down, and I'm in the shallow part. I'm trying to find him, because if he got off into the deeper part, it's not contoured. It's made to go straight down where the sun won't, hit the Loch Ness Monster. When I went down. I went down several times, and on my last time, because I was giving out of breath, I'm at the point of near exhaustion. I feel something. I grab him. He's hanging right on the ledge of falling off in the very deepest part of the pond. And I grab him. I pulled him back up, and I made it to the life preserver. I'm able to grab a hold of the life preserver, hold him, and make it back to the dock, and get back on the dock, put him on the dock, and I turn him over and started pushing on him to, push the water out of his lungs, give him CPR and everything. And I eventually, after about 10 minutes, well, probably not that long, about 4 or 5 minutes, he blows the water out, and he had a lot of water up in his sinus area. And by that time, the military's called, and they're getting an ambulance back, getting a Jeep or ambulance back there to get him to the hospital. Okay. And, but what had happened, all those Vulcans that were back there, they had never seen anything like it. That I risked my life to grab this guy, to grab this kid. Now, I'm not sure how I actually got picked, but this is in the back of my head. Going back to those 5 female Vulcans, the eldest one in front, that was Spock's mother. And your mother knows you more than anybody. And I impressed her. I believe I impressed her when I did that I would risk my life to save another. So, she wanted to make sure nothing would happen to her son. But anyway, getting back to Sovac.
normal for male Vulcans to not help other people?
You know, when you jump, when you're a time traveler, James, you're not supposed to interfere with the other timeline. You know, we've already went through that. You're not to interfere. All right. But what happened was Sovak had just graduated the younger Vulcans that was in science class, and I was more closer to him than I was Spock at the beginning. That was the first time I saw Spock. So what happened was this young Vulcan female that I was romping, she looked at me different after that, and she said, "You know, um, we have a mission coming up, and she said that guy that the other Vulcan that you ran past on the dock, I'm his niece." She, in other words, I didn't know it. I'm screwing Spock's niece, and the woman, the elder woman. Well, I wouldn't say elder. The more senior woman of that group, that was Spock's mother. So that's how I got to know him. But about that time, you know, I'm talking. I said, you know, I wanted so bad to finish my physics, and I was telling them about Oppenheimer, and they said, well, we're gonna talk to the Vulcan embassy. They didn't tell me what they were going to talk to them about. They said, well, we're going to talk to the Vulcan embassy. We have to report in every so often. Well, come to find out, they said, well, we're going to put you in the physics class. There's no other Vulcans in there. And Stovak said that, you know, he'd love to teach. And he said, yeah, I'm going to teach you physics. So I went into his class. It was just me and him again, just like it was Oppenheimer. And things started to click. And I brought my notebook. You know, I had my notebook from 11 years old. I wanted to figure out what was you know, what Oppenheimer, I wanted to know what the end formula was. And, you know, he started looking at the science officer, started looking at it. And after a while, he started getting very excited. I mean, he got overly excited. And what had happened was I had made a mistake, and an eye looked like an L. One of his, well, it might have been, it was something like that. Plus one of Oppenheimer's numbers. He didn't make a mistake. He just never finished it. But it was hard to read Oppenheimer's writing, is what I'm saying. I had made a simple mistake. But it turned out that it was a new type of energy. And James, what I'm about to say is, I know this is going to sound incredible, but it was to a new type of a gadget, a new type of a weapon. So we went, even the Vulcans got all excited. It's a new power source. Now, the way things work at Area 51, there's a reason why you have $200 hammers and $600 toilet seats. Because, you know, you skim. And I was, you know, I would always steal stuff if we needed something for the base, I could always get it. So you got these companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin. And I would go to their warehouses and get different parts, off the shelf stuff, and bring it back. So we started building a weapon, the gadget. And I did not want to tell the military what I was doing because, one, the way Robert Oppenheimer was treated. And of course, the other physicists at the Manhattan Project, they had help from an alien. Well, I'm getting a little help too. It's on my terms now. And because of what had happened at Camp Hero, I knew I was doing something very important. And being in Navy intelligence, you know, it wasn't like I was doing anything against the United States because I never was liked to begin with. I'm a paperclip prize, just like the scientist was. So what I did, we built a new type of a gadget. It is a proton torpedo, and it is so powerful, if this was to go off, it would probably tear this planet in half.
Is that what's called a cobalt bomb?
No. Look, nuclear weapons cannot match up to it. There's not, if you shot all your combined nuclear weapons, all the countries that have nuclear weapons to go airborne, this has more power than everything put together.
Is that what's known as a strangelet bomb?
No, James.
Involved in it?
No, James. There's nothing stronger than this. Is a planet killer. You don't have a planet if this thing goes off. I think what it was, what Oppenheimer was doing, because of the alien invasion stuff, and it didn't look good from his point. So once the bomb was built, now we didn't load it first onto the Enterprise. First mission was to move the Lockheed Monster, Nessie, and her baby to safety. And that's when I got to know Scott and the doctor, Bones, as you know him in the movie. And that's when I started flying the Enterprise. And there's no such person as James T. Kirk. This is something that was done by the writers, because when you get a classified document, you have to fill in and make a story out of it. So what I was doing was movie star stuff for movies. They would make movies out of this stuff, But during the time that we lifted the Loch Ness Monster up, we almost crashed the Enterprise. Now, the old Enterprise could go to warp 3. It could not, it could go, there have gone higher than warp 3, but warp 3.2, the craft starts to disintegrate. Now, if you look at...
And that's 27 times the speed of light.
Let me finish. Pull the Enterprise back up where we can see it, James. A little more pronounced. But if you look on the back of the Enterprise, you see stabilizers back there. Well, just like you have a fine-tuning fork, you hit it, it makes a harmonic sound. It vibrates. But when you get above warp 3, you can feel stuff. And I would take my coffee, put it by my chair. I could look at the vibrations on the coffee. And you have to learn this. You can't teach it. You have to learn it. But I could fly this craft at warp 3. That's 3 times the speed of sound. But there was a flaw in the old Enterprise because of the vibration. So, after my mission was over, once I had, gotten the Loch Ness Monster and the little baby Loch Ness to another planet, the Enterprise had some structural damage. It needed to be put in dock and to be repaired. Now those repairs would take 17 months. And during those 17 months, I moved on. I didn't think any more of it. The proton torpedo set at Nellis Air Force Base, not even the highest commander over all the black programs at Nellis Air Force Base, didn't know. None of the other men in black, I did not tell them. So I'm the only one that knew, other than for the Vulcan science officer, Stovak, knew that the proton torpedo was there. We couldn't let it fall in the hands of the military. And because if it ever went off, you wouldn't have a planet Earth. It's too much power. Let me finish. It's too much power. So during the 17 months when the Enterprise was in dock, another kid by the name of Will Decker. Now, if you watch the movie Voyager, Veger, that's Voyager. You missed when you were announcing me on the internet at the beginning of this interview. You said the Voyager movie. It's Voyager, Veger. Now,
What does that mean?
James, let me get to the end of the program. I know you want to know, but when you break my thought, I leave out important information. Now, when the 17 months that I was gone, Scott, because it was a new form of energy, the Enterprise was about 20 years, well, I'm saying about 20 Earth years old. That's what I'm guessing. But the Enterprise was not built on Earth. And it is not, and I'm going to be very firm here, it is not the USS Enterprise. It is the Enterprise. But because I was still in parts, because I was good at that, parts of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, all those big defense companies, I was still in parts, their parts, and we were refitting the Enterprise. And because I knew it was important, James. And the 17 months I was gone, Scott was refitting the Enterprise. Now, what happened, Decker had a personality conflict with everybody on that craft. He was supposed to fly that craft. He was going to be the commander of that craft. I had moved on in life. My Vulcan girlfriend had left by that time, and I had moved on. But what happened was, 17 months later, I'm contacted again, and I'm ordered to report to an Admiral Guru. Never met Guru, Admiral Guru. And when I landed at the building, I look up and I see Science Officer Stovak. He greets me and he says, "How are you doing, Admiral?" Well, I thought he had misspoke. You know, I just thought he misspoke because I never held anything higher than a captain's rank. So he says, you have a meeting with Admiral Guru. And I had like about 3 minutes to get up to that room. And but I was told that when I got there, I already knew that anytime they call you, you had 50 minutes from the time they call you to the time you get on the craft. But I didn't know they were going to call me to get on the craft. I just knew of the 50-minute deadline. So I went up and talked with this admiral, United Federations of Planets. That's the first time I met this officer, Admiral Guru. And they sat me down. They said, look, Jim, because some people, my name is, I was going by the name Jimmy, but some of the crew members would just call me Jim for short. He said, Jim, we've got a big problem. And the crew's they're ready to go mutiny on us. And he said that Decker was riding everybody's back. You know, he had a little too much power. And, you have to give people a little room when you work close to them. You do have to respect people, give them a little room and lead by example. And he said, we, we're, he said that we're going to promote you to temporary admiral or rear admiral. I think it was a rear. I was going to be promoted to rear admiral, but temporary to admiral. But I will fall back to rear admiral once this mission was over. So I'm going from a captain to a temporary admiral, and if I do good, they're going to move me back to rear admiral. So what could I say? You know what I mean? So when the meeting was over, I went ahead and went up into the teleporter and went on up into the to the Enterprise. And one of the first people when I got there, I met an ensign there, and I was led into the what you got up behind you, the control room, and the staff was in there, and they said, they all greeted me, and they were happy to have me back.
Did it look like this control room?
Yes. And they're all in there. Everything is in disarray in there, and they're rushing like hell. I mean, it's like a madhouse in there. And but they are all surprised to see me, and they all was glad I was back. And they said, "Well, he doesn't know." In other words, they're getting ready to demote Will Decker. He was going to be the commander of that ship, and that they were going to put me back in the captain's chair. So, because Will Decker didn't know, Commander Will Decker didn't know, I had to go down into to the engine room. On the way down to the engine room, I run into Decker, and we both go in together. Decker still thinks he's in command, so he was going to order me around. I just let him talk. And I did see he was riding Scott or Scotty. And I didn't like the way he was treating Scotty. And I called Decker. I said, Decker, Commander Decker, I said, called him over where Scott wouldn't hear it. And I looked him straight in the eye and I said, I'm here to replace you. So there was some animosity there, a lot of anger. He had, he just wasn't the type of person that he liked giving orders, but he didn't like taking orders. So I don't have very long, before I have to get the Enterprise up and going. Scott said it would take 20 hours to get it going. I said, we don't have 20 hours. I want it done within, I think I said I want it done within an hour. All right. So we still had 50 minutes left because we have additional crew members coming on.
And what did he say to you?
Who?
Scotty.
He was glad. He was very relieved to have me back because I knew how the engine room worked. I knew about propulsion systems. But Scott was far more qualified than me, but I understood it better. But what happened was
Cleon too? I mean, I'm sorry, Vulcan.
he's human.
Okay.
We're human. Let me finish, James. I know you want to know, but when you break my concentration, then I leave stuff out. So I go back in the teleporter room, and two figures are coming through the teleporters, and they're having some problems, and they start to form. The teleporter is misfunctioning, and there was a woman and there was a man in there, and that was a science officer, Stovak, and we couldn't hold them. And what they got back down on Earth didn't live very long. So the science officer died along with one of the other crew members. So here I am on an Enterprise that's been newly refitted. I've only had about 10 minutes to look at the diagram, which, that's like going in a nuclear power plant and trying to find what's going wrong when all the controls are going wild. It takes time to try to figure things out and get the manuals out and retrace everything. So, I went ahead and got in the captain's chair after I, confirmed that the science officer was dead and I had to leave. Now, when you get in space, impulse power 0.5 is a half a warp. You don't put the Enterprise into full warp while you're in this solar system. Okay, so 1.8 hours later, I'm at 0.5 warp. I'm passing Jupiter. It takes you 9 months just to get to Mars, James. Okay, so
At half the speed of light, which is 0.5 warp.
Okay, but we were still kind of having problems with the computers. The computers they were acting a little strange. So our power fluctuated. In fact, we stopped at one point during that tour between Earth and Jupiter. So we made it in 1.8 hours because we were still having problems on and off with these engines. Now I use gravity assist when I go around Jupiter. And you let the planet sling you out like a yo-yo and a slingshot. And when I put it into warp 1, the computers are locked. The computers are locked. And because the Enterprise, this new energy that Oppenheimer had, we converted the engines to this new energy. And those two back fins back there, when I said they vibrated, we moved the engine. Scott moved the engines back about 25, 30 feet because of the harmonic vibration. So the engines are running off antimatter, new type of energy. Up this point, no starship can go above warp 3. But when we put it in to warp 1 and we started off, what happened was there was a meteorite or planetoid, I call them a meteorite, a big iron rock, magnetized. Now, if you took a magnet and you put it on a refrigerator door, it'll pull and stick, and it's hard to pull off. But you take it and you tilt it and you break, the force field. Tilt the magnet, comes off easier than just pulling straight out. Now, when I got this craft in warp 1, the computers froze up. And because I was behind an asteroid that was magnetized, it was pulling the Enterprise even faster. So I went through a wormhole, okay? And I started to go faster than what the computers and engines started, rated at. It's kind of like you're driving down the road and you're going 100 miles an hour, and you put a rope on the back of a trailer truck and you put your car in neutral, but your engine is still running at 100 miles an hour. You're being dragged, and the engines are ramming up even higher. So I wanted, at this point, they have loaded the proton torpedo. I have only one proton torpedo to fire. And we're going faster than the speed of light because this asteroid and a wormhole. And I wanted to use my phasers to save my proton. And Decker jumps up and he counters my order. And he goes over there and he fires the proton torpedo before I could figure out what was going on. And when he did, it blew the asteroid up, and we were able to break free of its gravity field and slow down. The Enterprise stopped dead in space. So here I am, I'm in space, my engine's gone flat. But what happened, Science Officer Spock was listening. And we were up there for several hours, trying to figure out what's going on with these computers. And what had happened when the Enterprise underwent a refit, the reason the phasers would not fire is because all energy that goes through the computer goes to the engines. So my phasers were locked, and that's why Will Decker jumped up and fired the torpedo, the proton torpedo. So my orders are to get this craft going to find out what it is in space that is such a danger. And by this time, the science officer Spock shows up. He comes along with a shuttlecraft and he comes on board. And I tell you, I was glad to see him. And he said he had been listening, and he comes to offer his services, being that the other science officer died in the teleport. So he goes in there, he spends a few hours, he finds out what's gone wrong, and he's able to repair it. And when he did it, we get powered back up. I put, went ahead and put it back into warp 1, and then I went up to 2 and 3. Now, when I got to warp 3, you have to remember with these new engines, no starship had been past warp 3. The old Enterprise never got past warp 3 without, breaking apart. And
Was this around 1980?
James, please don't interrupt.
Well, that's my job as an interviewer.
I understand, but
I'm doing my job here. Otherwise, you don't need me here. And some of the people in the audience.
this was after 1980. I can't give you exact date, but it was after 1980. I was 22. So let's see. Let me think for a minute here.
Commander Decker just saved your lives.
I want to say it was closer to 82, but I can't, James. You're asking me in the middle of a complicated scenario, but it was slightly after 1980. Okay. Now, the thing is this: when once I got up to warp 3, it's time to either do or die. So I bring it up all the way to warp 7. No starship had been to warp 7 without breaking up after 3.2 warp drive. And because the engines had been moved back, the harmonics from the tail end did not vibrate. So I'm a human commander on a Vulcan ship. I've just done something that even the Vulcans never believed was possible. I am going 7 times the speed of light. Einstein says that when you go past the speed of light, you're time traveling. Okay, my figures are Stardate, and I'm going by my old notes here. You just give me a second. Stardate is 741.26 was when I broke down. So it's just past that Stardate. I think it was like 741.34 is when I got back up right before I put it into warp drive. So I'm doing what Einstein. I mean, Einstein couldn't have done that. The Vulcans couldn't have done that. This is responsible. Robert Oppenheimer, those formulas did something very important here. So that's why I brought up Oppenheimer's, name. Now there's a message up that I'm reading about USS Enterprise in Star Trek Warp 7 is normal cruising. No, it's not. It's not normal. And there's no such thing as USS Enterprise. I said that before we even started off on the story. It is Enterprise NC 1701B or 1701. So once we got going, we got there, several hours later, James. Now, what had happened, the Voyager satellite fell into a black hole and it emerged on the far side of the, that's it, 1701B. 17-018. That's the
CC
that's
1701A.
that's the prototype I was in. Now I think the 17-01B. I think that's what they built after that. The first one was A. That's the prototype. I was looking for when I saw the other one. I thought it was A. I'm looking at my notes as I'm talking to you when he pulled that up. But yeah, that is correct. NCC 17-01A. That's the one I'm in. The B is the ones after that came after that because all of them had to be refitted or either, even worked on more after that. But what happened was they had a deep listing platform out in space that it detected these three uh, Klingon ships that had encountered this cloud, and they disappeared into the cloud. Now, when we got to it, I already knew from the Esalen station right before they went off, that they had scanned it, and they thought that because they had scanned this cloud that it was provoked them. So I knew better to scan them. So what I ended up doing was I didn't scan them. I wanted to get up as close as I could and let them get a good look at me, and maybe I could pick up something. I don't know where that came from, but huh. I wished I had all that prior.
Yeah.
That
Warp 7 is 656 times the speed of light.
Huh. Anyway, let me get on my story so I don't get broke on it. Anyway, what happened? It shot. It shot a ball of plasma at us, some type of plasma energy, and I immediately put up the shields to this craft that I was in, and it held. But it took about the electrical charge drained off about 70% of my energy, and the science officer said it was 12 energy field, the type of energy that hit us. I mean, 1,000 starships could not have generated that. So that's another mind-boggling statistic. 12th energy field coming from that weapon they fired at us. So ended up while we're trying to build up the power back up into the Enterprise, the alarms start going off, and all of a sudden there's a beam of light came up into the control room, where what's in your background back there, where I would sit in my chair. Yeah, and it's just like looking at a welding torch. It was so bright it would hurt your eyes, and it illuminated the whole room. And it was just going from computer to computer, and it was like a Tesla coil. Um, it was just draining off. It was accessing the computers, and when it got down by where the science office computer was, um, when it was realized, the science officer hit his computer, disable it because it was learning all the schematics that was in the ship. So it immediately attacked him, started electrocuting him, plasma, I mean. And then it went around the room after the science officer was on the floor, and I thought he was going to get Decker. He just hovered there by Decker for a little while, and it's so bright you just have to put your hand up to keep him from blinding you. And then from there, it just went across the room, and it got next to Aaliyah. Now, Aaliyah, she's a navigator, and she's a human, but she's raised on another planet. She's Deltan, and she had cancer, and we didn't want her wearing a wig, so everybody knew it, but she had to get her head shaved because you're taking radiation treatments and all that. That's the reason for the bald head in the movie. But it ended up being some of the beams of that plasma field. It reached out and hit her and flipped her around, and then she disappears, just vanishes, And we're all looking. Where did she go? Few minutes later, more alarms go off, and she's on one of the lower decks, and went down there, and she is in a shower, and she is completely naked. She is totally naked in the shower, and I opened the door up, and we put a robe on her, and she's got some type of implant in her throat. And it's kind of like you're using one of those devices when, like you have throat surgery, it vibrates, but there's a little higher tone in that. She's been implanted, had an implant in her. Well, you get implants all the time, so we brought her down to sick bay. She's not even a human. She is a total machine. To look at her, you couldn't tell. You could not tell she was a machine.
She had cancer, but she was a machine?
No. The reason she was bald headed, she had cancer when she first got on the ship. She was bald headed. She was in remission, but she had lost all of her hair. Now, when we x-rayed her, all of her organs she's a machine. She's not, even her skin was synthetic. Even her moisture in her eyelids was replicated. She was totally, she wasn't even transhuman. She was totally a machine. But she had her memories, some memories. Decker got with her. I'm busy getting back up on the front of the ship. He knew her better than I did. I think he had a fling with her. I don't know. But Spock, the next thing I know, the Vulcan, the science officer, he's gone down. There's a hatch been opened up in the lower section, and there's a backpack missing, booster pack. He goes out to where this orifice is at, and see, it goes back about Vulcans. They don't think like us. They're very curious. It's just the way they are. And he flies into the orifice. Well, I got a a backpack on and went after him. But I was smart enough. I'm not going to use the main thruster, not at all. I just kind of use the little smaller thrusters and not the main backpack thruster. That damn thing, you take off faster than a jet with that thing. So when I went into the orifice, I went through the plasma tunnel. I'm thinking it's like a hologram in a way, but I was seeing all kinds of stuff in there. It was creating a hologram of
It was a holodeck.
a holodeck, yes. And I was seeing entire planets in there, galaxies, all kinds of wild stuff.
Do you think they do porn in those holodecks?
James, I'm not going to go into that. I'm just saying, you know, my first thought was like Project Bluebeam, holograms, but this was a lot more advanced than any hologram we had. But it basically just like it was a it was the journey of this machine, everything it encountered. So I went and I've seen Spock, and I went ahead and got him. He was out. I don't know what's happened to him. Brought him back out and got him back on the ship to sick bay, and he was talking out of his head, crazy. Um, I think what happened, he got electrocuted again, and this time he got it probably in his face. But it took him a little while for him to come around. But when he did, he said it's a machine. It's a machine in there, and by that time, like I said, Will Decker had pretty much figured Aaliyah out, and Aaliyah tried to make. It was recording Aaliyah was recording everything we were saying. But all of a sudden, we're starting to be tracked. A tracker got put on the Enterprise, pulls into this orifice, back down into the plasma tunnel. And I was saying, I mean, it was a huge ship in there, very huge. So the description of it, what you see on in the movie, is very, very much what I saw. And see, we were recording that. So everything that you saw in the movie, we were filming it. So when the movie was made, they just uploaded the film. But when you see the Enterprise going into the orifice, you saw exactly what I saw. And it had, like I said, it had a floating dock in there, some octagon steps. We were stepping on these octagon stones. And there was a satellite in there. And it was the Voyager satellite. Now, the Voyager plate, it had, caused us of space weather. It was all corroded up. I cleaned it off. And Decker did what I did, or similar to what I did, what happened at the base in England. You open the panel up, but he wouldn't take. When he tried to talk into it, it wouldn't take it. The wire was separated. And he tied the wires together, and the rest what happened in the movie is very accurate. And when he did, he started to pulsate, and both of them together. And they came together, and just like a sparkler, a fireworks sparkler, it just got bigger and bigger. We retreated, got back in the craft, and they were gone. It was just kind of an explosion of stars, and that's the movie. Now, what are your questions? I wasn't trying to be overly, you know, I was just trying to say when I'm trying to explain it, it's it's pretty far out, but that's the real story, and they just simply took the classified information, and that's a soft form of disclosure. Uh, the movie was made. I never got a penny off the movie. Go ahead with your questions, James,
Uh,
and from the audience as well.
yes, I'm going to do one question. We're going to put it over to Johnny. So, how long were you stationed on the Enterprise?
Well, James, you have to remember, um, Stardate is a little different from timeline. I measure our timeline as Earth years. Our sun rotating around the Earth. Now, Stardate, and I'm not an astrophysicist, okay? I just specialize in propulsion systems. Um, I'm presuming that Stardate is kind of like daylight. I mean, like it's like time zones, okay? It may be you're in a time zone different from me. So Stardate, and I've always thought this was the star around Vulcan because it was a Vulcan craft. I think they use their star like we use our star. We call our timeline, we call ours a timeline when we do when we take a time jump. They use their star as their star date. Does that answer some of it? I can't hear you, James.
I thought planet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought planet Vulcan was inside our sun. So, is that incorrect?
James, I've been to their planet one time to Mount Shaftna. Uh, I mean, that mountain looks like Mount Everest that they live up on, where these Vulcans live. I only went to the base of it. I never went up on it. Um,
But is it very volcanic and hot?
no, it's not. It's very similar to our atmosphere. Now it's a little bit kind of I would say, if you put on an amber pair of reading glasses, or either better yet, if you put on some yellow sunglasses, you see light as a yellowish color. That was more like what I saw, more of a yellowish color.
Hmm.
The soil was more like our soil in the southwest.
Well, let's say that for another episode about the Vulcans planet. So, Jimmy, so to answer the question, would you estimate maybe a month you were there, or for years, the star dates to Earth years?
James, I'm just the captain that sits behind the desk. I mean, those are astrophysics, okay? My specialty is propulsion systems, and I know, like I said, as far as the you're asking me stuff about a Vulcan ship with a few parts manufactured on it from Earth, okay? Um, I know you want to answer, but I'm scared I'll give you the wrong answer. But just because you heard it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. A lot of that Star Trek stuff is made up. A
What
lot of
about
Star
Cleons?
Trek,
Are Cleons real?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
Klingons are real. I've met one.
Was it
Just
Worf?
only thing I can tell you, James, is that they're real. We're going into stuff that I know you want the answer. I'm trying to give you the answer, but it's like we went from A to Z so quick, starting off from the time at Camp Hero to the time I'm on this craft. I'd never believed that I would be back on the Enterprise, but I don't know where they came up with James T. Kirk or Jim Kirk. I never used Kirk. I never used T. I have used James, but not on the Enterprise. On some of my Black Ops missions, I've used, because we use different names. I have used James before, and and I use Jim there as a nickname instead of Jimmy. Um, so it gets a little
Oh,
squirrely there.
let's let Dr. Johnny share something.
Yeah.
Yeah, very fascinated with everything you had to say. I followed it carefully. Um, I know that you probably know a little bit about Vulcans because you had a relationship with a Vulcan woman, and then you were being around Spock and so forth. So, was there anything that you gleaned from that encounter with them that they had some? Because I know in one Star Trek movie they talked about saving Spock, and he was talking about esoteric things, and Doc McCoy says, well, I don't know much about Vulcan mysticism, and they go into this kind of esoteric stuff about Vulcan mysticism. Now, do you know anything about Vulcan mysticism?
Well, when they can clone, little grays are cloned.
Right.
That's nothing new. Um, a lot of people. Let me get off the subject just a little bit, and then I'm going to go back onto the subject. When you see people and they claim they've been reincarnated, what happens is you can be cloned. Okay, they can take your sperm and clone you, but just like a bird goes uh, south in the winter. Um, it's just it's bred into the species, and when the clone is grown, it carries memories with it. That's what happens when someone starts saying I've been reincarnated. That's a red flag goes up, and I don't say nothing back, but I listen to them. I already know what's going on. I'm just not telling them what I'm knowing. But getting back now to Spock, he when he died in the engine room, and he did die, because I was there when it happened. Um, he was recloned, and the new the new Spock had memories. Now, as far as the mysticism and all that, just like I had to go to the Paiute Native Americans, I had a spiritual issue. They have their own spiritualness. Does that answer some of the question? I mean, because we're getting off on stuff that's just really above all of our heads here.
Yeah, I just want to know if they had some sort of connection with, uh, the source, or, you
Yes,
know,
they do.
okay. That's what
You,
I was curious about.
now, but let me say this: religion is a very touchy subject. We've had more wars over religions through our histories on Earth than anywhere, and you can see that right now. What's going on in the Middle East? Okay, so when I was around Oppenheimer, I was going through like I said, I was going through my thing with the Native American Paiutes, but now Oppenheimer, um, a lot of people didn't know this, but Oppenheimer was Hindu. He took the Hindu religion, and I'm thinking that when he first met an alien, um, this alien that was claimed to be J Rod, um, he might have believed it was J Rod. He probably never met J Rod, but I knew the real J Rod. They probably had a crisis amongst themselves, and it shattered their religion. And when he took the Hindu religion, it doesn't surprise me because he was searching spiritually. And uh, I do know this, and I didn't get into it. I told James I wanted to get into it. I have a book here. I'm going to read something out of this book, but let me say this because this is important. We've been hearing a lot of on and off about the Dulce, New Mexico issue. There's been UFO researchers all over the place, but I was with Phil Snyder. He was a geologist, an engineer. And when you hear about the Dulce Wars, I was down in the caverns with Phil Snyder. He was my best friend. And one of the Greys shot him. It almost shot me. I had to communicate with hand language to this tall Grey. And but the problem is that the Philadelphia base or Los Alamos, they've started to rebuild it. The old base, there was a fire. Let me get back to the old base. The old base, it took them to 2015 before they get all the plutonium cleaned up. The contractors got to make some money, so they dragged their feet. They got a lot of money cleaning up that base. And then in 2000, they had a massive fire out there, and it burned almost all the buildings down. All right. And when it did that, uh, after the fire, see, it was turned over to National Park Service in 2015. But when that fire went through there and burned it all down, they decided to rebuild that area, except it wasn't going to be what it was. There's businesses that moved in there. They paved those gravel streets. Uh, they put in new water tower. Um, they put, you go in there. There's subways in there, chicken, places that sells chicken, gas stations, churches. You know, Dulce, New Mexico. I think the last time I checked, 12,000 people living there.
That's all underground.
No, it's above ground.
Okay.
All right, the city of Los Alamos. And then Los Alamos rebuilt itself. New labs, Los, they're building new labs out there, but it's adjacent to the old park. They're building a new park.
All right.
Lawrence Livermore Laboratories is building stuff out there. But what I'm trying to say, before I want to back out of this, what I'm trying to say is that when Phil Snyder was drilling out there is where one of the accidents when he broke through, and I was down there when he got shot. So let me ask you this one question, James.
Okay.
How do you feel being that our nuclear waste are stored in concrete coffins and they're stored out there on the new section of the Los Alamos? See, the parts of Los Alamos never did reopen. There's still parts out there that are classified that you can't go out on. It's too much plutonium. But once you cross back over the bridge to the old Los Alamos, that's been open. The new Los Alamos is not open because that's built on the contaminated part that never could be recovered.
Okay,
So
well, I like to answer the question.
these grays are all from there all the way to Dulce, New Mexico. Go ahead.
All right, so back in the early 80s, President Reagan was working on an initiative to release the new third generational nuclear reactors, which would have burned off about 95% of all the radiation. So it would also drop the price of fuel 90%. So we would have electric cars and it would free us from our oil independence. But as you know, well, we have certain interests in this country that keep us addicted to oil. And they could have also gone into these stockpiles of depleted nuclear rods that they could have used up all the radiation and make it inert mostly. So there's solutions for all that. And right, Jimmy, we don't have to be afraid of all that. But unfortunately, the people that are in charge are not interested in fixing the environment on this planet.
Well,
I had another question, by the way, about the Vulcans. Do you have any idea what their role is today in our present situation?
they do not like to interfere in Earth affairs. Um, they may come here from time to time to, uh, to stretch their legs, get off, um, to be a little social, but they do not interfere in American politics, um, and that's a good thing. But they do visit. Now,
Right.
trying to get back to what James just said, everything about the radiation. Well, Philip Corso, Colonel Corso, thought he's going to make a bunch of money off of the fiber optic cables. It never happened. We still have a lot that we don't know about the Roswell wreck, James. I I mean, we're learning, but we still have a long way to go.
All right, Jimmy, I got more questions. Let's get through this quickly. Okay, is the character Q real?
Refresh me on that.
Q, the omnipotent god that was portrayed by the actor. Oh my gosh, does anybody know? Okay, let me look it up. The actor who played Q. Does anybody know who that is? Q in Star Trek. You remember that character, right, Jimmy? John Delancey.
Oh, you mean to read the God Q?
Yeah.
Is that what?
Featured in the Next Generation series.
I can tell you about the old generation series, but you might have to put a clip up. But yeah, there is a God, but if that's yeah,
Okay, Jimmy, thank you. All right, next question. Uh, do you know anything about Project Hercules?
refresh me on that. You have to remember. I mean, it's kind of hard when to reach back uh, that many years, but refresh me on that.
Well, that was a question from the chat. So if that person is still here, by all means, go ahead and elaborate.
I mean,
Okay,
I would have to go back in and look it up, but
okay. So why did Dr. Cameron chose to give you a drug, like put you in MK Ultra, and was giving you drugs?
because I knew what happened on the Eldritch, that uh, I knew about time travel. Um, these flying saucers that I was flying, I could fly through time with it. And the purpose of giving me the drugs was to use me up and to discard me.
Very interesting. There's some, yeah, I want to talk to you in private about that after, like later on, but after the call. So why did they choose blonde haired and blue eyed? I guess preferably boys, right? More so girls.
Well, they do have girls, but they're down at Fort Tilden on the opposite side of Long Island. Now, they're used mostly for sexual entrapment, blackmail, and when the Montauk Boys need to communicate, uh, two males don't communicate very well, so they use a female. Plus, the females are sexual. But getting back to the blonde-haired, blue-eyed boys, they wanted to first use. They had already damn near used up all the German scientists. Then they were going after the children of the scientists, and to keep the programs going as long as you could, you know. And because I'm of Aryan blood, I was put into the black program.
Okay, thank you. And then I think it was Stuart Swirlo who said that they have more psionic ability when they're tortured and traumatized.
Yeah.
And they're also more easily mind controlled compared to, say, a black person.
Well, when you give somebody a type of drugs that they were giving me, it don't take much mind control. It's more suggestion.
Thank you. So next question. Oh, did the drugs make you phase through the objects?
No. But what happened was I have residual electricity even to this day in my body. I'm like a battery. Um, and if it gets too high, I can de-energize. That has not happened. Um, I have witnessed one of the eldest guys degenerize and go back to 1943, and I have a great fear of that.
Mhm. All right, so let's. I have more questions, but let's get Dr. Johnny a chance to ask a question. Do you have any questions, Johnny?
Um, I was just wondering, uh, with the Greys, I experienced an abduction myself in 1989. The Greys, some were Roboton, and there are a couple that were biological, but still they're all connected. So I'm just wondering, with your experience with the Vulcans and everything, you said they had a hive mind, or a group mind. Um, are all of them like human, anatomical, or some of them robots?
Are you talking about the Greys?
Well, I'm talking about the Vulcans,
The Vulcans are biological.
right?
Now, the little Greys have a hive mentality. They're like little bees. Now, Sweetie is one of the little Greys I know. Um, when I first met Sweetie, she was sleeping with an Air Force colonel's little daughter. And during the night, there was a thunderstorm. And I'm not sure what happened. The little girl was scared of Sweetie. And, uh, and I was in the barracks with the other hybrid humans. I was only human in the barracks. And these guys that were in the barracks were Caucasian males that had been split with tall grays.
Mm.
They're hybrid humans.
Right.
And Sweetie, which is a little small gray, they about 3 feet tall. Um, she got very frightened. Well, they don't have a sex, they're born without sex organs, but because Sweetie was raised by naval females, um, they take on the personality of, or because she was around females, the little gray developed a female personality. If the gray was around males, then it would develop a male personality. But what happened was Sweetie ran into the barracks and grabbed me by my arm, and that's not a good thing to do because when Sweetie did that, it's kind of like a mind melt, a Vulcan mind melt in a way. And she immediately bonded with me because of the tremendous fear that of lightning. and it reminded her of the Roswell crash, the storm.
Mm-hmm.
It brought back bad memories, and it ended up that she crawled up in the rack with me, and so she started to sleep with me, just too frightened to leave my side, and everywhere I went, she followed me, and but eventually, what happened? Um, I'm very familiar with the Greys. I've worked under some of the Grey commanders when I flew the flying saucer, and I have reported to the Grey commanders. So,
Yeah,
um,
I've tapped into their group mind, and and part of it is not only esoteric, but it's also hard frame computer too. And there's a big resource there of information that's constantly updating. And so that's been one of the things that happened to me when I was abducted. So I, you know, I was able to tap into that and find a lot of information.
well, I have been present when they do the autopsies, and their insides are just incredible. They're more they're more insect-like.
Yeah.
They're a cross between a biological entity and an insect.
Their skin was like a frog or a salamander, but yet they had uh, noises that they make like an insect, like a cricket or something.
No, they're different species,
Yeah.
subspecies mixed with other species. But Sweetie would bark like a squirrel, a
Hmm.
low bark, and one bark is yes, two barks are no. But the way I always communicated with Sweetie, you look them in the eye, is telepathic.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand the language, but uh, if I looked her in the eye, I could communicate. But if I broke eye contact, I couldn't. Um, Now, I'll tell you somebody who I think can do that, and she's a real controversial person, is Lena Napolitano. Now, she was abducted off the Brooklyn Bridge, and she's had a movie come out. She's got another movie come out within a few days. It'll be on Netflix. I would highly recommend you look at that. But Linda, um, her mother used to be over Fort Tilden, where the little girls would go. And Fort Tilden is built pretty similar to Camp Hero. They're built same buildings, just rearranged differently. But um, what I saw one night, Lynn Napolitano, she could speak their language. I've never seen anybody in the 35 years dealing with, that's her. I've never seen anybody dealing with the Greys that actually spoke the verbal language. She can speak it. And I was there when my intelligence officer jumped on the guy that was beating her up. He was wearing an invisibility pack, and he beat him up. Uh, but Linda, I could put her in a trance, and she would communicate with me. And the only other person I ever knew to do that was Bob Hopkins. So I'm the only one that I know that can do that to her. She's only done it to Bob Hawkins, and she's done it to me, go in a trance. But she would tell me things that she couldn't remember when she's awake. Bob's dead now, by a fact.
Well, I was able to it eye contact made it easier, but the closeness. Once I moved closer to the one small gray that was not mechanical or roboton, it was more of a biological entity, and it was a young entity, and I was able to tap into its brain. We communicate telepathically because of the closeness. Once our energetic fields started getting close enough, and I still communicate through that today to their what I call the resourcery archive. So that's one of the things I'll talk to James about on another interview. But I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, I'm glad you did that, but you're not the only one that's happened to. It's happened to me all the time. Getting near things. I had it so bad that when I went to Vietnam, they would get me in a Cessna plane. I would fly around. They couldn't see what was below the trees, and I would pick out the targets. And if you ever watch the movie Final Destination 5, that is a very real movie about a bunch of people in a bus, and they have telepathic abilities. In fact, I would go to Fort McLean, no, Fort Meade, excuse me, Fort Meade, and they would make us stare at goats. So the Men That Stare at Ghosts is a very true movie.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
did you work for no such agency?
I'm sorry, what'd you say, James?
Did you work for no such agency?
Yeah, no such agency found me, and but yeah, that's a very real movie. And if you notice, one of them walks through a wall when it's all over with.
All right, Jimmy. Love your information. Let's go on here quickly. Did you ever know? Did you know anything about a jump room at UCLA when you were there? Anything jump rooms?
Uh, I went into one of the longer tunnels there, where nobody would see me come and go in and out of UCLA. Uh, yeah, there's jump rooms on the West Coast. I'm more familiar with the one down in Long Beach. Um, I only went to UCLA briefly to talk to uh, Jolly West,
Thank
but
you.
it wouldn't
All right.
surprise me. It wouldn't. In fact, I went to Stanford, and I did a lot of psychic research there with
Out
Arizona
of
Wilder.
SRI, the Stanford Research Institute.
Yeah, I was communicating with dolphins. I could go up and put my hand on the dolphins right below its, temple, and I could communicate similar to a Vulcan.
Yeah, let's do a show on that. I would love to learn more, but we have to move on here. Okay, so are Vulcans related to Tau Cetans or Orionites?
Repeat that down.
Are Vulcans related to Tau Cetans or Orionites?
I couldn't tell you that, James.
Okay, thank you. Did you know Dr. Zephyrin Cochrane, the inventor of the warp drive?
He's not the inventor. The inventor is Science Officer Stovak.
Stovak, is he a Vulcan too?
Yes, he's the one that died in the teleport.
Okay, wow.
He's the one that helped me figure out the rest of Oppenheimer's formula. You gotta. What you're doing is you're reading disinformation, James. I'm just trying to point that out.
Okay, well that's why we're asking you
Yeah,
questions.
yes, some of it is true, but most of it is stuff that's been made up for the movie.
Okay, next question. Does Leonard Nimoy look anything like Spock?
No, Spock is short. If you walked up to him, you could just about put your chin on top of his head. And and I want to say something else. And I'm not talking bad about him. I'm just telling you how Vulcans are. Vulcans are high. They have a high protein diet, and they eat a lot of junk food, like peanut butter, crackers, junk food you get out of a vending machine. I was going all over um, Los Angeles, breaking into vending machines just to keep his, because he has to have so much protein, or he get anemic.
What kind of clothes would he wear in public?
You wouldn't see him in public. No one's never seen him but me.
Yeah, but the Enterprise showed up over the Phoenix Lights, right, back in 1997.
They got out, but the crew, like I said, the human parts, it's made up of humans and Vulcans. The humans got off and went into the city to have a good time, while the crew stayed on the ship.
Okay. And were you on the vessel when the Phoenix Lights happened?
No, I did meet with them on one of the mesas out there. Um, they came. They buried some weapons at an undisclosed location um, in some coffin-like containers.
Hmm.
But you have to remember they're not here to interfere.
Okay. Okay. So but why did everybody see it over the Phoenix in that time?
James, I'm not really sure. I think they had some problems with the cloaking device. You're being seen anyway. Let's get them off and let them just go on in town and walk around. You know, they're humans.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go on here. The connection of Roddenberry, then we'll bring Dr. Johnny on again. So here's something I found. I was trying to find some information about the channel of messages. Supposedly it was Roddenberry's partner or something that was a roommate with this person that was channeling. So this person writes, maybe 10 years ago, my uncle was working for Paramount and smuggled out a copy of the script called The Nine. I was promised not to make copies and said the studio didn't want anyone to ever see it. I can give a full synopsis if anyone ever cares, but basically the main character, who's obviously Roddenberry himself, is approached by a group of ESP researchers who claim to be in contact with alien intelligence. Through a series of demonstrations and experiences, they convince him that he writes Star Trek on behalf of the beings from another dimension so that mankind would have a more positive archetypal image of aliens and be less fearful upon first contact. Do you
Uh,
agree with that or know anything about that?
I think that it's very likely, very true story that he is relating here. Um, if you watch the movie Final Destination 5, uh, it shows remote viewers, you know, doing some pretty wild stuff. So I would not be surprised if they did approach Roddenberry. Now, my understanding that when Roddenberry died, um, his ashes was brought up in space and scattered. So he did have a big impact. Now, when the first Star Trek shows came out, it was the Vulcans just tinkering around with it. They wanted disinformation, but the early shows weren't done that very well until Roddenberry, started to. Through the years, he got better at it, and then he started believing some of this stuff that he was being fed. So they would take a classified document that's wrote out, and they'd turn it over to a writer, and then the writer would just fill in the blackout spots. And after you do it so long, you get better at it. And like I said, as things advance through life, then the movies got more better.
Well, did you ever meet Lucille Ball, who helped fund the first, was it Desilu Studios, who put the 2 years out, first episodes, Star Trek, or did you meet Gene Roddenberry?
I never met. Let me think for a moment about Lucille. I think Lucille believed it. Okay, now I don't know if Lucille was a presidential model. She was an attractive woman when she was younger. And it could have been, like I said, they might have been using Lucille as a, you know, soft disclosure. But she definitely had the rights to the movie. Um, I think I met her once, but I was just so young. My intelligence officer was, more prominent then than I was. And you have to remember when I came off the Eldridge, James, being in that green mist and the the radiation, the microwave radiation, and all the drugs, it wiped a lot of my memory out. But then again, I was they got me in time, and I was able to, rebuild my life back up. But yeah, I believe everything that he said that about the script, and I think is most likely a true story.
Well,
We're here.
do you know about the Nine? And who that is? The Nine.
He would have to come back on at a later date and tell the story because I know we're pressed tonight. But
Okay.
I do think that you might want to invite him back and let him tell
Well,
his
this
story.
is just something I found on the internet, but very
Yes.
good idea. All right. So, Dr. Johnny, any questions?
I have one last question about all through Star Trek. They always had to get orders from the Federation, and so I just wondered where the Federation fit in today as far as your experience.
Well, I think the Federation is made up of probably a little of everybody. Quite possibly. Well, there's no more MJ-12, but quite possibly high-ranking military officers who have, you know, either retired or near retirement, and they want what's best for all of us. But the way that the government is treating them, the politicians treat the military very bad. It's a very sad story because all those guys out at Area 51, they're good guys. And then you look up and you see a movie about Men in Black, portrayed as, dangerous and psychotic. But I know that they turned my life around. I'm
Interesting.
very, and I became one of them. I was there for 35 years.
Elena Denon says the Federation of Worlds. So it's the United Federation of Worlds.
Yes, yes.
And do you know how many members there are in that at that time? Do you remember?
No, I don't know. Everything's compartmentalized, James, for the safety of the Federation.
What about Starfleet Command? Could any of us sign up to be a Starfleet officer? Join
It's,
Starfleet.
it's what you know, not who you know. If I would encourage to take classes in physics, uh, not to be political. Don't disrespect any politicians, but don't put a bumper sticker of somebody on your back bumper. Some politician's sticker, and be spiritual, but don't push your religion on anyone. Respect everybody, and when the Georgia Guidestones were blowed up, that hurt me very bad because that was not New World Order. Those were the scientists that I worked with, the German scientists. They too had lost their religion, and that hurt me so very deeply when the monument was blowed up, and I'm still
Yeah,
hurt.
Jimmy. Yeah, we did a whole show about the
Yes,
Georgia
yes,
Guidestone. So go check
yeah,
that one out.
yeah.
All right. Next question. Let's see here. Did we? I mean, we don't really have time to go through all this technology. So Admiral Guru, who is that?
Albert Guru,
Did I not say that right?
you said it close enough. Go ahead with your question.
So, um, what was your connection with him?
I met him one time, and I was briefed that there was trouble on the Enterprise. Uh, the crew was in disarray, and that's one thing I can say. Wherever I went during my 35 years of being an MIB, people always wanted to work with me,
Hmm.
and even the extraterrestrials would want to come around me. It's just my personality. I give everybody space.
Yeah, and you're very calming too. Just talking to you, you just feel relaxed. Okay. Thank you. So, and Guru was a Vulcan, right?
James, all I know was, and I'm echoing a little bit there, is I sat in a room um, and I was talked through intercom. Okay, um, there were some other men in there, but those are the ones that were going back and forth, intertwining with Scott on the Enterprise. The Admiral never did show himself.
And is there like a universal communicator that allows you to hear them in English, or are they speaking English?
I heard him in English. I don't know about a communicator. Uh, he if he he spoke perfect English.
Well, what about the other extraterrestrials? Did they all speak
There,
English?
there was no extraterrestrials in that room. Now, Stovak, Science Officer Stovak, was not in the room. He was somewhere else in the building. I was being briefed on the the uh, the moral issues with the crew. The crew was very demoralized by Commander Decker, his treatment of them.
Yeah, can imagine. Okay, so you don't know if there's like a universal communicator. So everybody just spoke English.
I would believe there would be such a device when you have different species communicating. There very well could be at different locations being fed into certain communicating channels.
Great, thank you. And as far as Commander Decker is concerned, so in the Star Trek fictional universe, he was written in as Commander Pike, Captain Pike, right?
James, I've always known him as William Decker. He goes by Will until he started acting up. Um, a lot of the stuff that you hear is stuff that's made up by the movie studio.
Thank you. Okay, quick. I'm gonna run through these real quick. Let's see here. In Star Trek, did they have replicators?
Explain replicator a little bit.
Um, Tea, Earl Grey, hot, slightly sweet.
I'm sorry you cut out on me.
Tea, Earl Grey, hot, slightly sweet. Like next Star Trek, next to Picard, he would ask for Earl Grey tea, and the replicator, the food replicator.
Oh, food replicator.
Yes.
Well, in the future, people don't eat out of cans. Um, when I was on not the Enterprise, the Eldridge, I teleported into the future so far in the future. I had a sack full of spam that was left on the ship because when I jumped through time, I didn't know how long it'd be till I could eat. And when I came through into the future, they thought when I was reaching into my sack that I was reaching for a weapon, but I was reaching for a can of spam. I wanted to open it because I was dehydrated very bad before I collapsed. And they tased me, and they had never seen food in a can. They knew there was pictures of it from a museum, but all food in the future would be this pink paste
That
that you,
comes out of a food replicator.
yeah. In fact, before I was sent back to the Eldridge, um, we opened up the spam, and they had never had solid food. And it was like a gourmet to the officers in the future. Those were colonial Marines. I ended up being a colonial Marine.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's way too much information right now to go into that. So, all right, thank you. Let's see here. The HAL 9000 computer, was that the same one that was on the Star Trek Enterprise?
The HAL 9000 was invented in Illinois, and
Oh, yeah, Illinois, yeah.
if you watch the movie, it'll tell you there's a nameplate on the bottom of it, and it'll give you where it was invented in the year. But yes, it's very real. And HAL 9000 was built by a tall white warrior, and I have been around HAL and communicated with it.
But that would have been the same type of computer, right? On the Enterprise.
On the Enterprise, there wasn't one on the Enterprise. Um, the HAL that I knew of was on Earth. I don't think it was set up on the Enterprise at that point.
Okay, Jim.
Pe- People make decisions on the Enterprise. The Vulcans make the HAL was built by a tall white warrior, different species, rather than from a Vulcan. The
Thank you.
Vulcan,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Next question. Dilithium crystals, true or false?
True.
And do you know anything about them? Like, what do they look like? What can they do?
Well, they look about the size of a Russell potato that you go in a grocery store, and you put them in the engine. They amplify the energy. In fact, if you watch one of the movies where Spock goes into the engine and moves one, and he dies, I think our doctor here was, you know, asking about that a little earlier. Um, Go ahead. Next question.
Johnny, are you good? Did you want to add anything to that? Yeah.
Um, no, I'm okay.
You're off. I can't hear you, James.
You can't hear me?
I hear you now.
Why didn't they have med beds on these ships? They could bring people back from the dead, right? With a little bit teaspoon of brain matter, you could clone them back.
James, these ships are built not for that. They have a sick bay, you know. Um, they could put them in stasis if that was an issue. Something really was wrong with them. Um,
Okay, thank you. What is it like to go through the teleporter?
After what I saw on the Enterprise, it was kind of scary. It it needed the Enterprise was not ready to be launched. It was still in dock when this threat came from beyond space, and so it was hurriedly put into action. Um, I did not have time to go through all the blueprints, the diagrams, and that led to the screw up, you know, with the proton torpedo being fired.
Yeah, but what does it look like when you step into the transformer porter?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Well, you step up. There's a ring in there, and you stand inside the ring, and you de-energized, and then you reappear um, at another location. There's when it starts up, it's like you can't catch your breath. You know how you breathe in and you can't catch air into your lungs right before you de-energize. If that's what I thought that would be interesting.
Oh wow. So many questions. Yeah, dilithium. I forgot to ask you. Where do they come get the dilithium crystals? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I do know they're interested in eye crystals here on Earth. Um, They may be manufactured from their planet, James. They might be trying to back engineer eye crystals. I have no idea.
Okay, in Star Trek, they show episodes where they need to put more energy into the shields to protect the ship. So they put a message out, "Oh, I'm going to take out some energy away from life support." Is that actually true? Would that even matter, the amount of energy in life support to support the shields?
Well, I I can only tell you what I've experienced now. The way that the computers were rerouted, it takes the energy from the phasers and reruns it through the computer. Reruns it from the engine to the computer. It locks the phasers up. So that part's true. Um, all energy is just towards, you know, actual, your life supports are going to stay on, but other than that, all energy is routed to the engine. I can't hear you, James.
Oh, thank you. Someone was asking a question about the picnic, the Vulcan picnic. Like, what did you learn there?
I learned that they're not they're not code, the Vulcans, as far as the being social. They 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 are one as a group, okay, and they couldn't jump into the water to save the kid because it alters the timeline. So I knew that from Camp Hero, but I like them. I mean, I get along with them. I don't know if Spock considers me his friend, but I do know that his mother sized her son up, and it was well that I was on the ship because I had nobody else would have gone in to get him out of the orifice. So I've always heard that the Vulcan females were psychic, and her ability to do a reading that far away is amazing.
Anything about dining customs?
What now?
What about their dining customs, or did they want to know anything else about, like, other than weather?
What does dining have to do with weather?
Oh, I guess Alba is just interested about the customs and what. But yeah, it's not too important.
Well, I can tell you that you can get a good lay if you give them a Hershey's chocolate bar. I mean, they crave they crave peanut butter. They'll eat like a goat and won't gain no weight. I've never seen a fat Vulcan. Um, and Their society parallels ours. They just, I never heard them talk about religion. Um, I do think they're spiritual.
Thank you. All right, we're done. Everybody claps their hands. Okay, so thank you, Alboy. I appreciate it. Thomas, I didn't really have time to go into warp drive mechanics. It's impulses, technology. It's just too much right now. So, Jimmy, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. This is if this information should go viral, right? People should know. Oh, by the way, Star Trek is real. Everyone should know it as a household thing. But unfortunately, we're shadow banned. But um, the audience knows, and we know the truth, right, Jimmy? So, all right, everybody. Oh, you have a comment, Jimmy?
No, I just want to thank everybody for listening through a long interview. And because of Phil Snyder's death, I don't tour. Um, I've always been like that. I do intertwine with the Men in Black, but I might I might be out the door as far as they're concerned. I've been gone so long.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, med beds will be coming out soon, and we've got Dr. Johnny here. Dr. Johnny, you have any final comments? Or why don't you tell people about some of the work that you do and your website?
Okay, yeah, I really appreciate everything you had to say today, Jim. It's the first time I've heard your story and so forth. So really, thank you and having me here and everything. Um, I also do a radio show every Sunday on Revolution Radio, and I have a website. It's all part of the Master Survivor University that I came up with the Master Survivor program and so forth from my experience with the Resourcery Archive. And the Master Survivor University, it's just the Master Survivor University.com is my website. And you can find my show and my program and the university right there, the Master Survivor University.com.
And you do hair mineral analysis, right, to see what's wrong?
Yes, that's one of the main things of the Master Survivor program is the hair tissue mineral analysis, the HTMA. And that's, I work with several laboratories, and that's one of them. And that's the main way I help people with their diet and get them back on track. And my patients don't get sick anymore. So that's something you can ask any of my patients.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead, Jimmy.
in the future, if you watch the movie Prometheus, you'll see a med bed. Now, I was on that craft, so it can do surgeries. The medicine in the future, um, it's incredible. Um, and we should do a show on Prometheus sometime, James. But all sicknesses in the future are um, conquered, and that's the way it is.
Well, so they have a cure for even the common cold too now in the future.
Well, James, our bodies wear out, and you don't want to be transhuman. Uh, Look what happened to Aaliyah. I mean, um, you have a soul, and you die, and you pass on to a higher dimension. Anything bio, anything that's biological will die, and your body is an avatar. You're just occupying a body. You are an avatar, and when you die, your soul gets recycled.
Thank you. Okay. Everybody, if you enjoyed this work, please go over to Healing Soul Survivors and make a donation. So, I don't get any monetization off of YouTube, and people are complaining about the ads on Rumble, so that's probably going soon. So I really need your support. So it's healingsoulsurvivors.org. You can also purchase a copy of my book called, there we go. If I put it in front of me, you can see it, Lone Wolf. And that's over at neologicaltech.com. And you can purchase a meditation cube as well to help you relax. I thank you all for those of you who stuck with us the whole time. And we will all see you later. Any other final comments, everybody?
I really appreciate you inviting me on, James. So thank you, James, and thank you, Jimmy.
Jimmy, any final words?
Uh, yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on. And I hope that things for you work out in the future.
Okay. Jimmy, make sure you leave your camera off. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good night or good day, wherever you may be. We'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Today, we are exploring a breakthrough in health and performance, the X49 Performance Patch. Joining us again is Arthur to explain a little bit about what this is about. So thank you, Arthur, for coming here.
Thank you, James, for having me. I'm excited to talk about this incredible patch.
So, Arthur, what is the big deal behind the X49 Performance Patch?
The performance patch is a clinically proven product that boosts AHK copper peptide in your body, which has a wide range of benefits. It helps improve strength, stamina, recovery, and supports bone health by increasing bone density and reducing bone breakdown.
Wow, so it's more than just a performance booster.
Exactly. It also supports cardiovascular health, improves hair and nail growth, and even helps regenerate dopamine and serotonin, which enhances your motivation and mood.
Wow, that's very impressive. Now, I've heard a lot about phototherapy and photobiomodulation therapy lately. Can you please explain to the audience how these therapies work and their benefits?
Absolutely. Photobiomodulation therapy uses specific wavelengths of light to stimulate cellular function and promote healing. It enhances blood flow, reduces inflammation, and supports the production of beneficial compounds like peptides. The performance patch utilizes this technology to activate your body's natural healing processes.
Well, Arthur, that sounds incredible. So, in addition to boosting your physical performance, the patch also supports overall health and well being. So, could you please tell us a little bit more about how it improves bone health specifically?
The patch lowers NTX levels, which are markers of bone breakdown. By reducing these levels, it allows bones to strengthen, leading to better bone density over time.
Wow, that sounds really important, especially as we age. You mentioned it also impacts dopamine and serotonin. So, could you please tell us a little bit more on how it does that?
Yes, it triggers pathways that support dopamine production, boosting motivation, and also supports serotonin through the 5-HT pathway, helping to improve mood and overall mental well being.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, I've also heard it helps reduce exposure to EMF. Now, how does it do that?
Yes, the patch provides protection from electromagnetic fields, EMF, which we encounter from devices like our phones and computers, helping minimize potential disruption in our body's natural processes.
So, it's helping physically and mentally, even while reducing EMF exposure. Is there anything else people should know?
Yes, it also boosts key amino acids like alanine for performance, histidine for repair, and lysine for collagen production, which supports healthy skin and tissue.
Well, so this particular LifeWave patch sounds really incredible. Thank you for coming on here to explain a little bit more about this product.
My pleasure, James. It's a great, non invasive way to support both body and mind.
So, if you're looking to improve your performance, recovery, and overall well being, the LifeWave X49 Performance Patch could be the perfect solution. So, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all later. Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.